Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Dragonslayer by KitsuneDragon. He said he saw great potential in my small body and he raised me. Because of him I lived, I learned, and I finally found someone I could call friend, even if he didn't call me the same. I am his son. I am his student, the Dragonslayer of Acnologia. I don't own anything. Adios.
Magic Council HQ Fiorian Branch, Clover Town, Fury. Lahar rubbed his glasses clean as he watched the massive holographic screen that hovered over the council table. It had only been a week since the heart attack, and now another week later, here he was standing in shock as he looked upon the images shown by the satellite square, Etherion. The Magic Council's HQ in Era was literally reduced to rubble along with a large portion of said city as the massive image of what had been dubbed the Kyuubi no Yoko that name would never catch on had literally burned it to the ground. Then 4 demonic beasts that were just as large as the Onibi Myobu, if not a tad bit smaller, appeared. They literally took their titanic fight across the border and into the lands of Seven. He watched in disbelief as Seven was made into a battleground and approximately 1/8 of the entire country had been turned into a wasteland. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, but dirt and stone. The Ogo no Fujin had been there as well, but it was also very confusing when he was shown to have aided the other 4 beasts in taking down the newly dubbed Kyuubi. The Kyuubi got oddly chummy with the other 4 it had been fighting earlier, only to make matters even worse on his head when the Ogo no Fujin was taken through a portal to the dragons nowhere, and wooden titans and wood dragons had entered the fray of battling beasts and began attacking the 5 demonic beasts. More destruction occurred, and before they could see the outcome of the fight between a massive 1,000-handed wooden Buddha of all things, against the 5 beasts, everything went up in fire and the connection to Etherion was forever lost. The workers scrambled to figure out what had happened, only for that answer to be brought swiftly to them when they began to receive reports about meteor showers. Said meteor showers were revealed to have been pieces of the moon that had been caught in Earth's gravity when it was shown to have visibly lost literally a third of its form. The shattered moon was now shown in the blue sky, and the pieces that weren't drawn into Earth's gravity now made a small ring around the moon itself. People across the kingdom had began to call that day, Heaven's Fall, a fitting title, but still it was quite a series of events to occur in such a short space of time. I haven't even been head captain for long and already the kingdom is descending into chaos. Lahar muttered. I expected things to out of control since a lot of stuff even managed to go haywire when head captain Han was in charge, but this is ridiculous. I thought things would go wrong in at least in a few years, maybe about 7. But no. It had to happen a fucking week after one of the greatest disasters in Fury. The doors that led to the council room of the Fury branch opened slightly, and the head of one of the amphibious workers poked its way inside. The newt knocked a few times on the solid wood to get the man's attention. Head captain? What? Lahar snapped, his glasses almost flying off his face when he swiftly turned to look at the purple and black newt. The anthropomorphic newt gulped as he was made to make eye contact with the obviously stressed out head captain of the Rune Knights. I'm sorry to disturb you in this stressful time, sir, but I came to inform you that they're here. The bespectacled man's eyes widened at the worker's words before he glanced down at his watch. Really? Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Lahar quickly began to straighten out his white cloak and fixed the pin that marked him as the head captain of the Rune Knights. However, he froze when the worker was shoved aside and the door was opened wider. His eyes widened as he stiffly and slowly turned his head to see his guests. Insert music. Fate, Zero ruled the battlefield. The first 2 he had recognized as Makarov Drayar and Juranikis, but then he felt as if blood had gone cold. Sweat unknowingly began to trail down the side of his face and the atmosphere of the room suddenly became a whole lot more intense. 3 other figures strolled in behind the men ranked 5th and 10th amongst the 10 wizard saints, and these men were their superiors. The first figure was a man whose head resembled a slightly gnarled tree trunk, whilst his hair resembled a leafy treetop. His attire consisted of a high-collared kimono tied with a belt, loose trousers, a coat, and a pair of boots. The second was a very short, older gentleman, about the same height as Makarov, who sported a long beard. He wore a dark-colored shirt, a light-colored vest with large buttons and stripes towards the bottom of it, dark slacks decorated with diamond shapes, a large hat, glasses, and an earring. The third member was an older gentleman with clean-cut, dark hair, a well-groomed mustache, pointy ears, and a tattoo on his forehead that was reminiscent of a cross. He wears a button-up dress shirt, a lightly decorated vest, dark-colored slacks, and a bow tie. He covered his ensemble with a dark-colored cape that sported light-colored crosses towards the midline. He also wore a large ring on his middle finger. The final member was a middle-aged man that was just about as tall as Hyberian, who was just a little over 6 feet tall. The majority of his body was covered by a hooded, dark brown cloak, Thus it kept a significant part of his face shrouded in shadow. However, the parts that weren't were due to the fact that his with medium length, wavy and spiked light-colored hair that jutted out at the top in a shape similar to rabbit ears, allowed the light to peek into his hood and revealed the small portion of his face. He had a light skin tone, and a noticeable scar that ran across his nose, but the upper portions of the hood served to cover his eyes, but Lahar's eyes were able to make out the fact that the cloaked man had rather thick eyebrows. Warrid Sequin, Wolfheim, Hyberian, and God Serena. Lahar managed to gasp out. Standing before him were the 4 strongest legal mages on the continent, men so strong that they put Makarov Dreyar to shame and were known to be so powerful they were regarded as not even being human. These were the 4 gods of Ishval. You actually came. Of course we did. Wolfheim growled out, his voice deep and gruff like that of a beast's. Due to everything that has happened over these past 6 months, it was best we finally join one of these summons to the council, or what's left of it. As straightforward as always, Wolfie. But then again, a beast is always supposed to be ha 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 ha. Warrid laughed, and he continued to do so as there was a flare of magic energy from the 3rd strongest mage on the continent. A large shadow then encompassed Warrod's shorter form, and a gargantuan beast with massive fangs growled at the tree-like man. Care to repeat that, Driftwood? Mama, it was just a joke, Wolfie. Always such a party pooper, you are. Warrid waved off Wolfheim. Wolfheim-san, Warrid-san, stop fooling around. Hyberian told his fellow gods. We are in a time of crisis and it's time we address it. Lahar-san, I apologize on behalf of my colleagues. It's no trouble at all. Lahar stuttered. Wolfheim snarled once more at Warrid before reverting back to his human form. Warrid continued to smile at the diminutive man before turning to Makarov. Maki, oh how it's been so long. Warrid smiled. I trust our guild is still causing havoc and mayhem everywhere we go. Just like the good old days when Mavis-chan was around? Nay? Makarov chuckled and nodded. It's as rambunctious as the day I joined and when you 4 founders of Fairy Tail were still active. That's good to hear, Maki. However, before the tree-like founder of Fairy Tail could continue the conversation, Lahar cleared his throat. Warrid and Makarov looked around and laughed nervously as they caught the annoyed looks from Hyberian and Wolfheim. Juro was as calm as ever, and God Serena appeared to be rather stoic as his head was bent low to keep his entire face hidden this time. Sorry. Let's get this mend. I'm quite sure we are all aware what the topic is. Insert music. Future World Music Final Judgment. I'm sure we are, Warrid-sama. Lahar took his place at the head of the table and then made a few motions with his hands. The holographic images that he had been looking at not too long ago moved in response before they were enlarged and their resolutions were enhanced. These images were taken by the satellite square, Etherion. It is with a heavy heart that I have to say that due to the Kyuubi attack that took place yesterday, the Magic Council's HQ building in Era was destroyed along with a large majority of the city that surrounded it. Thousands of lives were lost by the sudden attack, including those of the second seat, Org, and the chairman, Gurren Doma. A period of silence passed through the room as they bowed their heads in respect to the fallen. Rune Knights stationed in Era managed to help in reducing the number of casualties. At least 70% of the population was successfully evacuated to safety, but it cost them their lives as the Kyuubi easily shattered their magic barriers. However, the main reason for such a high number of survivors was because the Ogo no Fujin appeared with these 4. I could only describe them as demons, appeared and took the battle across the border of Fury and into the Seven's lands. The image containing Matabi, Kakuo, Chomei and Shukaku fighting against Kurama in the wasteland of Seven was highlighted. The Ogo no Fujin aided in taking down the Kyuubi, but then something happened. The image of the blonde Dragonslayer being taken through the void by the unknown assailant was shown before being shifted to the image of the Mokujin fighting the 5 Biju Exceed. Warrid-san, do you know what is? Hyberian asked. I do not, but it is indeed a high-scale wood magic. Woodmake is not capable of spells of that magnitude unless you were at my level or higher, and I'm not saying that out of vanity. I'm saying that because it is true. Well, Warrid-san, I do not mean to point fingers and make accusations, but it is because of your words I can only make the assumption that maybe it was you that appeared and began to do battle with them. The high-scale level of magic is something you as a member of the 10 Wizard Saints, and one of the 4 gods of Ishgar, is capable of. Lahar stated as he adjusted his glasses. I'm afraid that wasn't me, Lahar-kun. Warrid grunted as his eyes opened slightly, the beady black orbs looking intently at the Titanic bottle's images. Wolfie, Hyberian and Serena can vouch for me that I was with them in Minstrel. We had just gotten off after finishing up doing our mission of making sure our treaty work was still intact ever since Operation Blackwater 20 years ago. It is true. Wolfheim and Hyberian stated. Lahar turned to God Serena, but the hooded man remained immobile. Lahar's sweat dropped slightly. If he had known the strongest man on the continent was going to be like this, he wouldn't have invited him. Alright. Well, your alibi does check out, as the files here in our backup server show that you four were indeed given that mission to complete. The head captain closed the small holographic window he had pulled up. Lahar-kun. Yes, Makarov-san? The black-haired man turned his attention to the diminutive master of fairy tale with a raised eyebrow. I've been looking at those images you pulled up, and I've noticed that you have no record of the Ogono Fujin being present afterwards. Why is that? Etherians' viewing capabilities are heavily restricted to observing only the lands involved in the Etherion Treaty. As I'm sure you are aware, it wasn't too many years after King Toma's reign began that he was tasked with working with the Magic Council and came to the decision to utilize Etherion's magic energy cannon to destroy 4 of the 5 mage villages across Fury after they proved to be too hostile against the kingdom as a whole. Iwa, Kumo, Kiri and Suna were all wiped out in a single shot to each of their locations, and as a result, all the lands in Ishgar came to the consensus that Fury would keep the satellite square within a restricted space and no further, or else war would be the response. Bosco, Seven and Minstrel are all areas ruled by humans, and so we actually managed to strike a treaty with them to put Etherion within their respective airspaces, since the Magic Council is run by humans from all 4 areas of these lands. As a result, we were restricted to only scanning across Fury, Bosco, Seven and Minstrel. So the Ogono Fujin was taken by his assailant outside of these 4 areas. Jura stated with a matter-of-fact tone. Lahar sighed and nodded in confirmation. Indeed, Jura-san. We used the magic energy signature we gained from when Head Captain Han and Kokuo's battle with him as a way to try and locate him. We ran a scan over all of them, but the Ogono Fujin's magic signature was not found. The young Rune Knight commander then focused on the images once more. Anyway, we didn't know what happened because as these demons fought against the wooden giant, this suddenly happened. The members of the 10 wizard saints all leaned forward as they were shown the picture of the massive swirling vortex that took up a large portion of the sky in the image. We are not sure what it is, but it seems to be a singularity of some sort. The Kyubi, the other 4 demons and the wooden giant were all drawn into the vortex. After the vortex was about to close, it was then that Heaven's Fall occurred. The council room was quiet for a moment as they looked at the image before Hyberian spoke. Lahar-san, you are much too young to have been told about this. You probably would have been told eventually due to your status of Rune Knight head captain, but you probably had your hands full with everything concerning the heart attack here in Clover Town. Told about what? The bespectacled man asked with a look of confusion on his face. In this world, or rather, this dimension, we are labeled as Earthland. Hyberian stated, however, what you are about to learn is that we are a dimension that lies parallel to another. The dimension of Edalus. Edalus? Lahar exclaimed. Yes. Wolfheim spoke this time. That massive vortex that formed in the sky over Seven is an unnatural phenomenon generated by the people of Edalus, the gateway to the parallel dimension known as the Anima. The wizard saint paused as he allowed the information to soak in for Lahar, and he didn't judge the man as he steadily and clumsily reached for a chair to sit down in. The look of distress on his face was enough to show that his mind was extremely close to snapping from all that was occurring. The kingdom is being terrorized, and now there's the existence of parallel dimensions. Do any of you want my job? The wizard saint's all sweat dropped at the young head captain. Taking off his glasses, he planted his hands in face and took a deep breath to try and calm his nerves. So, Hyberian-sama, Wolfheim-sama. Do you know what the plan of action would be when a SS-class criminal is lost to space and time? That would not be our problem. That would be Edalus's problem now. Warrid answered for his fellow wizard saints. So, now that we've run through this, it's time to run the issue of what will be done about the Magic Council. Indeed. Hyberian nodded in agreement. We will need men and women who are capable of aiding in running the entire magical community of the human race. But in order to restore the people's faith in the strength of newly formed Magic Council, they will have to be strong and people that they can trust. In all honesty, Lahar-san, you would be a perfect fit to be a member of that new Magic Council. Me? But I have my responsibilities as head captain, I can't. We are aware of that. Jura stated as he crossed his arms over his chest. It is why we were not going to include you, but as Hyberian Dono just stated, the people need a new Magic Council that they can trust. What about some of our more intelligent members from the La Continent? Makarov suggested. For example, my solid script mage, Levi Magarden. She is quite an intelligent individual and knows the law and legislation of the Magic Council like the back of her hand. Also, the Trimans from Blue Pegasus are very popular, but also very intelligent as well. I wouldn't be against the notion, but bringing in such young people is not exactly something that will reassure the people of the human kingdoms, Wolfheim muttered. Then would it not be best to make you members of the 10 Wizard Saints as the new Magic Council? Lahar suggested. The silence in the room was positively deafening as the 6 members' men turned to the bespectacled head captain. He gulped audibly, sweating a bit before he continued to speak. You all are looking for people that are capable of reassuring the people of the human kingdoms that despite the attack by the Kyubi, the Magic Council has not been vanquished. You are looking for people of high social standing, people who are strong, resourceful and popular amongst the people. So, who better to replace the Magic Council than the 10 Wizard Saints? The 10 most powerful mages on the continent. Or rather 6, since there's only 6 of you now. The boy has a point. Wolfheim muttered. However, to give people like us, people who already have more power than we know what to do with, a position in the political world is quite a situation. Not to mention there are only 6 of us, with Jelal Fernandez being excommunicated, and Jose Porla being killed. Not to mention we could not find a pair of mages to fill the shoes left behind by Minato and Kushina. We cannot evenly distribute a workload, Makarov added. We can make the new members as young, SXY women, Warid exclaimed. We need some fresh, blood, in this council of old men. Not to mention a woman's touch can help out. I agree wholeheartedly, Warid-sama, Makarov exclaimed as he wrapped it around his friend. OMAKKY, I always knew you were a great choice to be the 3rd master of Mavis Chan's guild. The 2 fairy tale mages laughed, but were cut off as a massive shadow enveloped their forms. Don't be such perverted idiots. Have some self-respect, Wolfheim roared as he turned into his beast form. It's just a joke, Wolfie. Warid laughed. You don't need to be so serious about everything. The strongest mage in Ishgar snarled before turning back to human form. Dumbass fairies. He sat back down in his seat, but his ears twitched when he picked up on Warad's words as the weakest of the 4 gods leaned over to the titan of fairy tale. We'll definitely get some hot women in this group, Warid whispered. Yes, Warid-sama. A small bit of blood dripped from Makarov's nose as his imagination ran wild. Wolfheim snarled, his fingers digging through the thick marble that the council table was composed of. His growl erupted from his throat and he prepared to deal another tongue lashing against the fairy tale member, but he was prevented from doing so when his superior spoke. I suggest that we accept the proposal to become the new Magic Council. Hyberian stated. However, until the Magic Council HQ has been restored in era, and until we find 4 new mages to replace the ones we have lost, we will not officially take the job. Does that sound fair, Lahar-san? I think Hyberian makes a great deal of sense in his terms of agreement. We can help put the kingdoms at ease with our acceptance, but we will also not push our way into the system since by our stating that while we will be officially handling everything concerning the Magic Council's duties, we will not be entirely official until we fulfill the need to replace our missing 4 Wizard Saint spots, as well as rebuild the Magic Council HQ building. We can use this Fury branch building here as a temporary HQ until everything comes full circle. Wolfheim nodded his head. I agree with Hyberian Dono. The Earth Magic user spoke. Also, Wolfheim Dono's suggestion to use this building as a temporary stronghold of the Magic Council will help our standing since we will have your backing, Lahar Dono. As head captain of the Rune Knights, your word is the law of the land until we have been put into office. So, we all agree then? Makarov asked. The 10 Wizard Saints will take the place of the Magic Council when all things have been settled? God Serena-sama. I know you are never one to talk, but do you have any qualms against this decision? All eyes turned to the most powerful legal mage on the continent, said eyes widening when the cloaked Wizard Saint actually issued a response. Given it was a nod instead of an actual verbal response, but a reply was a reply. Excellent. Lahar exclaimed with a smile on his face. The people of the 4 human kingdoms will be ecstatic to hear how quickly the Magic Council will bounce back. I will have my workers draw up the paperwork to put the 10 Wizard Saints into office, and you 6 will have the mission to look for your remaining 4 Wizard Saints to fill in the spots left behind by those that have died or excommunicated. This meeting is adjourned. Insert music. 2 steps from Hell in Paradisum. Royal City, Edalis. The Royal City was the capital city of Edalis' kingdom, and is also recognized as the capital of the world of Edalis itself. It was a huge and impressive city that was built upon a circular plain, with the royal palace located in the center, decorated with an emblem of the country, which was a black symbol reminiscent of a saber crossed with a musical horn, which had its smaller edge ending in a curl. The main tower of the palace almost reached the level where the flying islands which surrounded it were floating. The area around the palace was divided into zones, each of which was fortified by a wall and positioned slightly above the previous one, forming a spiral structure around the palace. In each zone there were numerous towers of different inconsistent size. Most of them were located directly at the palace itself. A golden gate led to the city and allowed people to access all external zones. The city itself was more like an amusement park than a regular city. Everywhere, there are varieties of magic powered by lacrima. Even mundane things such as plaques with the names of streets or lights were powered by magic. Men, women, children and animals alike all shared in the joy and happiness that came with the usage of magic to carry out their everyday tasks. They smiled, laughed and played through the streets. However, all of that had come to a temporary halt as all the members of the populace were gathered in the courtyard of the king's castle. Due to the size of the royal city's population, not all of them could fit inside the courtyard despite it being incredibly spacious, and so some were forced to rely on the lacrima vision screen. Some were located in homes, Some were displayed on the other side of shop windows as they picked up the radio waves being emitted from the highest spire of the castle. The image on the screen first displayed the castle, but then flickered as it zoomed in to reveal the image of their king. His Majesty, King Faust, ruler of all of Aedolis. Faust was a tall and slim elderly man with very long, wavy grayish-white hair reaching down below his shoulders, with a similar beard going down below his neck to his upper chest, and a matching mustache. He possessed an elongated, rectangular face with prominent cheekbones, with a similarly elongated, prominent flat nose. His round eyes were circled by a series of wrinkles, vaguely reminiscent of square scales. Faust wore a regal, yet little garish attire, which was brown in color, possessing different shades. He sported a pinstriped brown coat with buckled belts covering the lower part of each sleeve and lighter brown cuffs, each complete with an additional, matching buckled belt over a darker vest. He wore a skirt-like cloth, possessing stripes similar to the ones on his coat. The skirt was matched by a pair of light, baggy light pants tucked inside a pair of dark-colored boots, a long, bright brown mantle covered in a rhomboid pattern, which came with a shorter mantle covering his shoulders, this one having white fur lining its edges, possessing simple decorations in its lower part and a collar consisting of many small rings lined up one after the other. Instead of a crown, covering Faust's head was a headgear reminiscent of a rounded mitre, which got larger near its upper part, and was white on the lower edges and on the semicircular front part, but the same color of Faust's cape on the rest. The semicircular part bore the crest of the royal family, which doubled as the crest of Aedolis's entire human-based society. The king of Aedolis cleared his throat before looking into the camera lacrima. Members of the kingdom of Aedolis, lend me your ears. I am Faust, your king and the one who has served you, my people, so faithfully over the course of many years. Magic. The energy source of our fair land that has driven us to the level of advancement that we now possess. We use magic to perform nearly everything in our daily lives, from activating our vehicles, to simply power our electronic appliances in our homes. However, as you have all known, ever since the early days of the kingdom's founding, magic energy has always been a non-renewable resource that had to be used sparingly. My father, and his father before him, they were all people who utilized magic in order to provide for the kingdom, and I am no different. As you have all known, by utilizing the space-time gate known as anima, we became capable of funneling magic energy across worlds. A possibility that could not have been created had it not been for the greatest scientific mind in the kingdom, and my chief of staff and my personal advisor, Biro. The crowd clapped and cheered as the camera lacrima shifted to Biro. Biro was a very short, elderly man, sporting a strangely shaped nose and large eyes. Aside from his horn-shaped eyebrows and the tufts of hair on either side of his face, he was completely bald. He also had some dark liver spots on his forehead and on the side of his head. Due to his small frame, most of Biro's figure was covered by his decorated cape, which featured a wide, adorned collar and two large metal-like ornaments on the front. Under it, he donned a simple dark robe with lighter edges. Biro smiled warmly and waved slightly to the camera before it turned back to Faust. Now, through the use of the anima, I have managed to procure sources of magic that had long since managed to escape our grasp. It was from the days of old, since the beginnings of our world, since the times before our kingdom's very inception. Somehow, through unknown means, these sources of magic energy, practically infinite in every definition of the word, had managed to break through to the world of Earthland and thus depriving us of their magic. But not anymore, for today, I, King Faust, have managed to retrieve them and thus our magic energy levels have skyrocketed to ones that we could only have dreamed about. My people. My friends. Today is the dawn of a new era. The era of the moment when humanity and Aedolis can finally move forward, and our limits are only the ones that we place upon ourselves. Faust then gestured behind him where a massive dark gray-colored lacrima stood. At its core, visible through the somewhat transparent material, a red glow was present. The color's shade was almost frightening, but no one paid it any heed as Faust continued to speak. Behind me stands the newest form of magic energy distribution technology, once again produced by Biro. This lacrima funnels the magic energy from its core before distributing it along various energy conduits to every single magic energy circuit in the kingdom's grid. And for those magic energy products that are not linked to the grid, do not worry, for this lacrima produces such a high output that your devices will be powered by the energy waves it emits. The people's eyes all widened in amazement and shock as they listened intently to the world of their king. Some had their jaws agape, and some were even on the verge of tears as they heard words that they thought would only appear within their minds and dreams. People of Edolas, I give to you magic. Faust spread his hands widely, and Biro smirked as he pressed the big, red button that present on the device in his hands. The lacrima's glowing red core unleashed a sudden humming noise, the glow becoming brighter and brighter until the red glow completely replaced the entirety of the dark gray-colored orb. The orb then unleashed the crimson energy along the conduits, changing the black-colored cords crimson. Every single appliance across the kingdom suddenly shut down for a few moments before coming back on with an even greater level of efficiency. The crowds of people across the royal city burst into tears, some falling to their knees as they felt their legs go weak. People jumped up and down, the more intimate members of society hugging and kissing one another. King Faust offered a friendly smile as he looked at the happy populace. It truly was a great day for Daedalus. He then turned his eyes to the floating islands and planetary objects which hovered above his beloved kingdom. He then shifted his head and directed his eyes at one island in particular. Heaven on earth for us, but it will become hell for your species, exceed. For I am now in possession of the magical creatures capable of felling you. Your primordial ancestors. He smiled darkly as he turned to the ground beneath his feet. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Girei, Central Battery, Underground, Daedalus. More than 400 feet deep beneath the earth that comprised the floating island that was the royal city, the necessary technology had been built to hold the new captives of the kingdom. A 400-foot-tall Buddha made entirely out of wood had been created. Numerous amounts of its arms, said arms numbering easily in the thousands, had stretched outwards like tree branches, with the Buddha acting as its trunk, fusing to become larger before they morphed into the image of the wooden dragons that Hashirama had used in his battles against the Biju Exceed. The dragon's jaws were opened extremely wide, with the tips of their canine, magic energy-draining fangs stabbing into the glowing 9 orbs. Wrapped themselves around the 9 glowing red orbs that were placed in a circular pattern in the air above the Buddha's head. The arms looked similar to the bars of a cage due to the way they positioned themselves around the 9 orbs. Hashirama, in his original Exceed form, sat atop the head of his wooden creation and watched in fascination as the crimson energy flowed along the length of his dragons before being funneled upwards by the massive crimson, formerly black, magic energy conduit that was currently sprouting at the top of his 400-foot Buddha. The loud humming of the central battery pulling forth magic energy was the only sound that echoed throughout the large underground room, if you could call it a room. However, the central battery could only pull out so much magic energy before overloading, and so the humming sound quickly ceased and the connections to the 9 were severed. The crimson glows in the orb-like ornaments then died away to reveal the images of the Biju Exceed in their original forms. Massive beasts, all of which towered at equal heights of 270 feet and possessed energy and strength capable of earning the title of godlike. Twice. I've been captured twice. Kurama growled in annoyance. This goes beyond insulting. Oni-sama. It hurts. Matabi whined as she curled up in a ball within her containment sphere. Kurama snarled as he turned towards Hashirama, but he was interrupted by his younger brother. You are a fool if you think you can hold us in here forever, youngling. Yuki growled. Hashirama's black eyes focused on the second most powerful and second eldest of the 9. Yuki was similar to that of the mythical creature known as an ushi-oni. He had 4 long horns on its head, similar to contrast to the other members of the Biju Exceed, all of whom had sharp, carnivorous, omnivorous teeth. Yuki had relatively straight teeth, much like the incisors or molars of a human. The Hachibi of the 9 was incredibly well built, wielding a muscular upper body structure, with a hunched back similar to that of a bison's, arms with spiked protrusions on the elbows, and hands with opposable thumbs like that of a human. Instead of hind legs, his lower half consists of his 8 tails which resembled the tentacles of an octopus. Last I checked, you all have been stuck here for 24 hours. That's an entire day. Hashirama replied. I highly doubt that you would be capable of getting out of here. Who's to say we can't just overload your contraption? Once we do, we can easily break out, and even though you managed to hold back 5 of us with this wooden giant of yours, you can't handle all 9 of us when we're together. No one is that powerful, not even you, youngling. Son Goku said as he punched the wall of his containment sphere. The orb released a deafening sound from the impact, but it did not even crack from it. Son Goku, in his true form, was a red-furred and green-skinned monkey, with the body build of a gorilla. His eyes were the same as when he was an Exceed, as like all of his siblings, his own having yellow irides and white pupils. He had spike-like protrusions along the length of its tails, elongated blunt fangs, and 2 long horns curving upwards on its forehead like a crown. Both his fangs and horns were tipped with dark colors. In its mouth, Sun didn't have a tongue, but had a big, round opening from where he can spit the greenish-blue fires, as well as the lava he had used during his 3-month session training Natsu. Bairo-san had come to the conclusion that due to their sentience, the 9 would be capable of figuring out that if they managed to overload the lacrima, they would be able to end their connection and free themselves. So, in order to prevent that, he had created the device with the ability to sever its connections to them by creating a magic energy blockade. By simply creating a switch similar to how electronic circuits worked, once the switch was flipped to an off position, it prevented any form of suction of the magic energy from the 9. Hashirama replied. And obviously, as you can see, your containment spheres are made of a substance capable of absorbing the vibrations generated by impacts, and your attempts to utilize your attacks will be effectively nullified as my Mokuryu spell will simply siphon off what magic energy you aim to utilize before you can even convert it into the elements you govern over." A moment of silence passed as the 9 were effectively repulsed in their verbal attempts to play psychological warfare with the Mokuton spell user. The brown and black furred feline smirked smugly at his victory of shutting up his captives. However, the silence was quickly a source of boredom. Other than the periodic activation of the central battery to draw magic energy from the 9, there was nothing much else for the 10 occupants to do. Even the 9, who were quickly became desensitized to the pain from having their magic energy taken from them, became bored. The 9 took the opportunity to then take some naps in between. Hashirama sprouted his tiny white wings and hovered around the room before turning to Kurama. "Oi, Kyubi." Kurama opened one of his eyes, the massive crimson orb easily dwarfing the manufactured exceed's size. "What do you want, youngling? What was Daedalus like, before you all betrayed the kingdom, that is?" That statement made the Biju exceed become fully awake, his siblings snapping up in a similar manner before they all directed their glares at him. "Oni-sama, why does the youngling think that?" Isobu asked, his head tilting in confusion. Isobu primarily resembled a large turtle, but with a crab-like shell, spikes all over his body, and 3 shrimp-like tails. Under his shell, he had red, muscle-like tissue. He had a pair of human-like arms and hands, but no hind legs. His lower jaw was rather big and had teeth like horns, together with his big forehead, which also had horns. It somewhat resembles a mouth with big teeth, making it look like the rest of his face is inside the mouth. His eyes were red and had yellow pupils. His right eye was constantly closed, indicating some sort of injury, and because of this, Hashirama had managed to take advantage of the Sanbi's weakness and compromised vision to take him down and take back to Daedalus. Kurama looked to his younger brother with a deep frown. Despite him being older than Shukaku, Isobu was by far the most innocent, and due to the fact that he was subjected to Shukaku's bullying when they were younger made him rather shy and afraid to voice his opinion when asked for it. It was due to this that the others were usually so harsh on Shukaku. However, before the Kitsune could make a reply, the Rokubi spoke. "Tell us, youngling, how old are you?" Seiken asked. Seiken resembled a large white, with a slight light bluish tint, bipedal slug with stubby arms and feet. He has 2 prominent optical tentacles that contained beady black dots at their tips, which were most likely his eyes. Multiple hole-like openings acted as a mouth which, like the rest of his entire body, dripped a slimy acidic substance as if it were saliva. "I was made a few years after you all ran off through the Anima to Earthland. In addition to that, Bairo took the ether nano scattered across the atmosphere to help fuel my growth and accelerate it somewhat. However, I still spent a number of years inside the incubation chamber before I became fully developed with the powers that I have now," Hashirama replied before raising a number of claws, muttering a few numbers to himself. His black eyes then met those of the slug beast. "If you were to put my moment of freedom from the incubation tube as the moment of my birth, then I would say I am approximately 10 years old." The Biju exceed's eyes all widened before they turned to each other. None of them uttered a word, but the silence was effectively broken from the loud snort that Seiken released. This created a chain reaction as the other 8 joined their 6-tailed brother in displaying their amusement. Hashirama's eyes narrowed in annoyance as he saw all of their bodies shake and those with mouths having wide smiles as they tried not to laugh with extreme difficulty. "Hashirama Senju, you are indeed a very funny exceed," Yuki said, being the first to recover from his laughter. "It is no wonder you do not know of the beginning of Daedalus and everything beforehand. True, the exceed were not even created until after Hagoromo Jiji defeated our primordial form and his mother. Technically she be our grandmother," Chome piped in. "And even when they were created they were told of the titanic battle that made Daedalus into what it is now." Kakuo spoke up. "The humans of Daedalus were also aware of our tale, but humans cared little for it after a few hundred years as they began to crave magic for their own selfish desires. King Faust was the human that led this act of betrayal and caused us to flee to Earthland." "What?" Hashirama exclaimed. But King Faust is a good king, a kind king. He has built all of this." He gestured to the contraption that the 9 were hooked up to. "All for the sake of his people. How the hell could he be the one that would have you all flee your homeworld? That's a lie." "Youngling," Matabi's mother echoed throughout the rocky underground prison. "You have been told lies and have been deceived for the entirety of your short life. You must understand that Daedalus is a place where nothing but destruction has occurred. Ever since the Shinju was made." Shinju?" The other members of the Biju exceed all turned to Kurama as he rose from his resting position and sat upon his haunches, his gargantuan visage staring down at the genetically engineered exceed. "If you truly wish to know what the prehistoric in you best listen closely and be prepared. This tale spans from the time when Daedalus was once an entirely stable world. The planets you see hovering in the skies surrounding the floating isle of this royal city were once their own worlds, but became barren and lifeless as a result of the destruction caused by the battle between our creator, his brother and their mother. Hashirama watched the strongest of the 9 with wide eyes, like a child listening to someone tell them a story. Insert music. 2 Steps from Hell lost in Las Vegas. During the time of the first Dragon King, the universe had just begun its early ages after just being born. From there, they forged countless galaxies, solar systems and worlds. The universe was ever expanding and also given a manner of sentience. If a world was created from within its murky depths, it performed the act of creating a dimension, a world, parallel to it. The worlds would be similar, yet at the same time, different. For us, the initial dimension was Earthland, and from there, the dimension of Daedalus was created. Now, in Earthland, after the age of magic had begun, the divine dragons, the literal gods and overseers of the universe, they created the gods and goddesses of various religions, pantheons that would serve to carry out the wishes of the various factions of humanity that worshipped them. However, the balance of dimensions between Daedalus and Earthland were upset as a result of the creation of these deities, and so, to balance off the power that all of these pantheons possessed in Earthland, the universe created a balance by the creation of the primordial deity that came in the form of a tree known as the Shinju. What did the Shinju do? Hashirama asked. The world of Daedalus possessed an atmosphere full of eternano, and as a result, it saturated everything. From the beasts on the ground, the birds in the skies and the creatures of the seas, all living things were given the ability to harness eternano. Humanity was then created alongside the numerous species of beings that were born in Daedalus, but like all of humanity, they became corrupt. The humans were all parts of clans, and each clan wanted resources and power among other things. The era known as the Clan Wars began in Daedalus. These clan wars stretched across Daedalus's planet Earth, and from the oceans of blood imbued with magic. The Shinju tree had sprouted forth from the ground, towering over all things, and as a result of the magic that fueled its body, it had to have more. It took magic energy from the very world around it, the atmosphere, the living things that its roots came into contact with, all of it was claimed by the Shinju. As a result, all living beings saw the Shinju as a deity. They worshipped it, prayed to it, burned offerings to it, trying in vain to try and appease the tree, but to no avail. Was that what caused the atmosphere of Daedalus to run out of eternano? Because the Shinju tree took everything from it? Not exactly, youngling. Kurama replied. For you see, after centuries, the tree stopped gathering eternano and produced a single fruit. The fruit was settled upon the highest of branches on the Shinju, and within the fruit was an astounding amount of energy. The divine dragons saw this and they knew that something was terribly wrong with the fruit, and so they issued a warning from the holy land of Alagasia, the dragon homeland. They told the humans not to eat the fruit, for if they do, terrible things will fall upon the world of Daedalus. That was all they said, and that was all they did. Due to being divine beings, the dragons had an entire universe to monitor, and so they left Daedalus alone, believing that the sentient beings of Daedalus would all heed their words. In addition, that belief, having gifted their sentient creations with the ability to choose for themselves, the aspect of free will, they trusted in that their creations would make the right choice to not eat the fruit that grew from the Shinju's branches. That trust was misplaced, wasn't it? Hashirama asked. Indeed, for though the humans and beasts all heeded the words of the first Dragon King, a chain of events had occurred that led to the creation of the most powerful being in all of Daedalus. In Earthland, just as many wars between species had occurred, and so the first mage, commander of the stars, bender of the elements, and the human who held the title as literally the most powerful mage in existence, Merlin, was born. However, the divine dragons failed to see the problem they had created, as their sentient universe saw the creation of Merlin as something that tipped the scales between Daedalus and Earthland. The two worlds were meant to be in a form of balance, and so a being of equal might was made to appear in the world of Daedalus in order to restore said balance. Kaguya Otsutsuki, a princess and leader of the Otsutsuki clan, tired of the centuries of war that her clan endured, she came to the conclusion that the only way to stop it was to become equipped with godly powers. Powers like that of the dragons, maybe. When the Shinju sprouted its fruit, she had made the bold move of climbing its branches. She ate the fruit, and then she became ruler of all. Kaguya became a powerful being who held just as much abilities as Merlin. As powerful as Merlin? Hashirama asked. As powerful, and possibly even more so, but that is just my personal opinion. Kurama replied. She could split apart the fabric of space to enter dimensions of her own creation. She could manipulate her bones, turn things to ash with just a touch, see anything and everything with her godly vision that came in the form of her Byakugan. In addition, she could manipulate the very 4 forces that governed the universe with her Rinnegan: gravity, energy, space, time. All of them were hers to play with now that she had eaten the fruit of the Shinju. The world was in a state of peace, and she too became a holder of titles. Progenitor of magic and Rabbit Goddess being her most popular ones. Rabbit Goddess? But wasn't she human? The Otsutsuki clan bore some animal-like traits. Shukaku answered. Some had horn on their heads, some had enlarged fangs. For Kaguya, she had a pair of ears which sprouted from her hair akin to those of a rabbit, Rabbit Goddess was a fitting title. But, even when she was ruler over the era of peace, she wouldn't stop there. Huh? Hashirama asked intelligently before turning back to the mighty Kitsune for answers. Shukaku is correct. Son Goku nodded in agreement. Her time as ruler of an entire world allowed her moments to settle down. She bore 2 children, the older one, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, and the younger one, Hamura Otsutsuki. She raised them, made them strong as the powers of being able to utilize magic on the same scale as herself became genetic, passing down to her 2 sons. And then she grew mad. Yuki interrupted. The Ushi of a Biju shuddered, his tentacles wriggling as he recalled the story. She lost her trust in humanity as the power she possessed ending up doing the very thing that caused the clan wars in the first place. It corrupted her. She began to warp the very fabric of reality by trapping the people of Edolis into an illusion known as the infinite Tsukuyomi. The Shinju tree would take its roots, bending to her will as she possessed godly powers that allowed her to manipulate wood and plant life similar to how you are capable of utilizing Mokuton, hashirama. Chome said as she stared at the wooden Buddha she and her siblings were being imprisoned by. Isobu's lone eye looked up at the ceiling with a twinge of fear. She was no longer seen as a goddess. She became a demon instead, more deadly than a Vis 9 could ever be. We were seen as demons and monsters when humans first saw us, but Kagaya Otsutsuki was the very definition of someone who could bring hell onto earth. And she did that act literally as well, her infinite Tsukuyomi spell locking away an entire planet's population in an inescapable illusion of their own vision of peace, which in turn was Kaguya's absolute peace. However, Kakuo spoke this time. Hagoromo and Hamura were able to avoid the infinite Tsukuyomi, and so they took their stand and fought her. Jealous of her own son's powers, she challenged them to try and defeat her. She said that their powers were ones she gave to them when they were born, but then came to the conclusion that those powers were hers to begin and that she would take them back, by force. But, they are her own flesh and blood, Hashirama exclaimed. Why? Like we said before, youngling. Utabi answered. She was turned mad by her own lust for power and the want for her infinite Tsukuyomi to remain everlasting. Flesh and blood, mother and son, those relations meant nothing to her anymore. She performed an act of complete madness to highlight those facts. Seiken stated. She merged with the Shinju tree and became a beast of unimaginable power. The Jubi, Kurama's words seemed to echo throughout the underground room. It was a being of unimaginable power as Seiken just said. With 10 powerful tails and the ability it retained from being the Shinju tree. The ability to take in the Eternano from all sources which surrounded it, it was practically unstoppable. Its ability to draw in magic energy was so great that it reached to the point that it pulled in nearly every aspect of Eternano from the atmosphere of Edolis, from the entire dimension. Hashirama's words died in his throat as he could only imagine what such a creature looked like, and to face such a beast. The sons of Kagaya were either very brave or very foolish. The line between the two was very thin after all. Hagoromo and Hamura fought for numerous days and nights with barely any rest, for rest meant certain death at the hands of the beast that was their mother. The Kyuubi continued. The planet was shattered into pieces, the laws of physics and magic were thrown entirely out the window as planets, moons and stars were pulled in from other parts of Edolis' space. The destruction was catastrophic and I would dare to say that even the dragons themselves would have been forced to struggle should they have fought the Jubi. Then the unthinkable occurred. Hagoromo and Hamura managed to end the battle once and for all. They wrenched free their mother's magic energy, absorbing it within their bodies before taking their mother's body and splitting it apart. To ensure that she would never be able to reform, the parts of her body were sealed away into the numerous celestial bodies, the whole planets which you see surrounding the floating islands of our dimension. So you mean all of those planets, all of those moons? They are what act as containers for Kaguya's body parts. And then what happened? Hashirama asked. Well, due to the entire planet shattering into pieces as a result of their battle, and gravity falling into disarray due to the presence of so many surrounding planets and moons formed by the sealing of Kaguya's body, it was what actually caused the formation of all of these floating islands in Edolis. The fox replied. In addition to that, the Jubi had taken in so much magic energy from the surrounding atmosphere. The cost of such an act was what resulted in this atmosphere we have had in Edolis for over the past few hundred years and the atmosphere we have to this day. An atmosphere with barely any Eternano to the point that no human, was capable of performing supernatural feats ever again. But what of Hagoromo and Hamura's powers? They knew that they couldn't carry on the ability to continue to use magic anymore, lest they or their ancestors, who could also inherit the powers of their mother, become the next Kagaya. So, they took the magic energies they had from themselves and the Jubi. They reformed the Jubi, but just as quickly as they had formed it, they split it apart. The Jubi, a beast of 10 tails, was split apart into 9 separate constructs made entirely of magic energy and given sentience. Kurama and his siblings all sported wide, toothy and amused grins as Hashirama's eyes widened. The samurai armor wearing cat spun around. looking at all the biju exceed with a look of utter disbelief and shock on his face. You mean that? The biju exceed all nodded simultaneously. The day the Jubi was split was the day that we, the 9, were born. The cube, skies of fury. The three-dimensional shape that was the airborne fortress of Tartaros hovered quietly across the expanse of blue, its artificial gravity working quite well to allow for all forms of earth and water which decorated its surface to move and flow as if they were being acted upon by normal gravity. From the left face of the cube, a small hole had opened up, and from the tunnel-like structure, a single figure popped out. It moved directly horizontally through the air before succumbing to the natural force of gravity, sending it down to the lands of fury below. Within the cube's confines, the master of Tartaros sighed in disappointment as he looked at his hand. The ash-colored skin was now being wiped clean of the crimson liquid that now coated it by his male primordial. He watched as Gaia closed the hole she had created, the one which she had used to dump the corpse of Bloodfang out of his mobile fortress. Such a shame, he muttered. To lose such a eye-based spell, the Sharingan would have truly been quite an asset to me. However, if its ability to control the minds of others can be severed so easily just by a simple look, then it's best I not have it at all. Such a waste of resources it was trying to get that annoying reptile to succumb to my will. Oh well, it is of no consequence to me. The lizard men are far too barbaric and few in numbers ever since Red Claw died all those years ago. But at least he on last use. His heart now fuels the fireplace somewhat, Gaia noted. Upon learning of the failure to keep the Kyuubi under his control, the master of Tartaros had literally ripped out Bloodfang's heart out of his chest and crushed it. The blood-pumping organ was then tossed into the fireplace, the azure flames now flickering a bit brighter than before due to the new form of fuel it was given. Blood leaked to create the small puddle that now lay before him, currently being removed by Gaia, from the humanoid reptile's chest due to the master of Tartaros having used his hand to literally snatch Bloodfang's heart out of his chest. Master, surely you did not have to kill Bloodfang yourself, Urano said as he continued his task. It is beneath you to have to dirty your hands. True, but, in the end, it matters little. I may have lost the Kyuubi, but my little pet did what he was needed to do since we got to our gateway to hell. He chuckled darkly. The time is almost upon us, so I will need to go down to the 9th circle and solidify my arrangement to summon forth my demons. It's time for them to climb out of the pit. I made a deal with Satan, and it's time he delivered. Master, I'm heavily confused. Gaia gulped audibly. When you spoke of demons to the Titan Slayers and his primordials, you spoke as if they were a new type of slayer. Are they not demon slayers? Also, why would you need to use demons if you have us? The master of Tartaros looked at his ash-gray skin, nodding in approval at Uranos's job of cleaning as the white-haired man stepped away. Once he finished looking it over, he turned to his other primordial. The brown-haired woman was given a sickeningly sweet smile, granting her master a very terrifying image as he stalked towards her. True, I could use all of the Titan Slayers as well as you and Uranos to act as my vanguard for the destruction I have planned for the world. The 14 of whom act as my closest and most trusted subordinates. He raised a hand and caressed the side of Gaia's face. The primordial of earth shivered from both the cold of her master's gauntlet's touch and from the sudden feeling of anxiety that came from the physical contact. Her master never was one for physical contact. You. Gaia swallowed the small lump in her throat. You know we would do anything you wish for you, master. Gaia managed to utter. A bead of sweat then traced the side of her face before falling to the ground as her master continued to keep eye contact with her. I know, Gaia. I know. The master's eyes then flashed with a madness that could be seen in only some of the most insane individuals, and his hand moved from Gaia's cheek to around her throat in a split second. However, you all are not enough. I have a need, a craving. His grip tightened and Gaia began to turn blue. Her eyes began to roll up into her head and she began to grip her master's wrist, trying in vain to free herself and regain the oxygen she so desperately needed. I have a craving for more than just the destruction that all of you are capable of bringing down. The demons of hell can grant me that which I crave. And what exactly is it that you crave that we cannot give to you already, master? Uranos asked. The white-haired man flinched when the maddened gaze of his master focused on him. The gray-eyed man laughed and the grin widened further, the act seeming as if it would threaten to split his face, and dropped Gaia to the ground, and Uranos rushed over the brown-haired woman's side, catching her before she could hit the ground. She coughed roughly as she urged herself to flood her lungs with air once more and normalize the circulation of blood to her brain. Let me tell you a story, my young primordials. The master of Tartaros turned around and motioned for them to follow. The two primordials watched their master as he passed by his throne, the azure flames of his fireplace serving to only enhance his mad expression when the shadows highlighted his eyes and smile. They began to move through the halls of the cube, passing by every single painting, door, and piece of art that served to decorate the black stone halls. Insert music. 2 steps from hell, the ancients. Once upon a time, the first 4 divine dragons were born from the Big Bang explosion. However, when the first Dragon King created the first humans on Earth, they created a mighty, omnipotent and omnipresent being to govern the Earth in their stead. That being became known throughout many eras, taking just as many names: Yahweh, Father, Allah, and in some of the eastern continents that had existed prior to the Dragon War that forged the savage lands, it was referred to as Mother. But to most of the world, the being was simply known as God. God? Gaia and Uranos tilted their heads in confusion. You're far too young to know about God. He faded years after Merlin came into existence and turned everyone down the path of magic and the belief in the dragons and the Dragon King. The Master of Tartaros waved off their confusion. Anyway, in order to appease his people, God served as the proxy of the dragons. Using the power of the almighty dragons, God supplied the pantheons to the various cultures of people across the planet that believed in many things. Of course, the universe acted in its semi-sentient manner to create parallel universes where those specific pantheons ruled over the planet, but we'll not get into that much detail involving the multiverse. Gaia and Uranos remained confused, so there existed the pantheons. Gods and goddesses of unimaginable powers, each of them ruling over multiple facets of the world. However, as you all know, to every divine and good being in the world, the law of opposites must be applied. The Dark Guild Master continued his tale. The belief in God and the other divine beings led to the formation of a world of good, where all pure and good souls who have seen the light. This world was created by God and the pantheons of the world. The Greeks and Romans called it Elysium. The Egyptians called it Aru. The followers of Islam called it Jannah. The Nordic Viking tribes had Valhalla. But the followers of God, later called Catholics or Christians after the death of his son, Jesus Christ, merely called it heaven. I know heaven, Uranos stated. I'm surprised you know anything, Gaia muttered. So mean, Gaia-chan. The blue-eyed primordial pouted before turning back to his master. So, law of opposites blah blah blah. Heaven was made, now what? Hell. Gaia stated. Heaven being forged resulted in the making of hell, didn't it? As intelligent as ever, master smirked. Hell. The underworld. Naraka. Hell has just as many titles as heaven. From there, the concept of fallen angels, demons and all other types of nightmarish creatures and the things children dream of that go bump in the night. All came from the belief in the law of opposites involving the concepts of heaven and hell. Wait. Uranos shook his hands wildly. Okay. I get the whole divine dragons made God as an omnipresent, omnipotent babysitter so they could watch the rest of the universe, and I get the heaven and hell stuff, but what I don't understand is how you're saying that all of this stuff is just coming out of nowhere just to appease the law of opposites made by the universe. The universe appeases to all of its inhabitants. The Master of Tartaros replied. It just so happened that humanity was the primary species on the planet and humanity possessed the very thing that could forge and destroy any and everything around them. Faith. Faith? The suit-wearing man asked. Faith, he confirmed. The belief in things that are usually associated with the divine and the metaphysical and is primarily associated with religion. Humanity continued to follow their respective gods and goddesses, their belief in God being the most paramount religious following in the history of the planet. As a result, over the course of the centuries, pantheons faded out of existence and the belief in those gods and goddesses vanished into obscurity. Of course there were exceptions to the rule, as there are ways to kill a god. How do you kill an actual god if Godslayer magic didn't exist? Gaia asked. It did. What do you think the Olympians used to combat the ancient titans and their titanslayers in the Titanomachy? The two primordials were silent at that. Now when the divine dragons turned their eyes back on Earth after spending many a millennia observing the other worlds of the multiverse, they found their world had strayed very much from the path they intended it to be. They wished for humanity to have forged its own path using magic, the very thing that showed the faith of humans in the dragons that created them. God had taken advantage of his post and led humanity down the path of prayer and believing in the miracles he brought about, even going so far as to bring about the fatherless birth of Jesus Christ through the Virgin Mary to spread his good word. The Master of Tartaros released a snort of amusement, and so, Merlin was born to act as their herald. The divine dragons, the Dragon King included, all came down from Algesia and showed their magnificence to the world, for what they wished for humanity was for them to use magic to forge their own paths and destinies. Isn't it a bit of a contradiction to create something with a predestined purpose, but still have free will? Uranos asked. I have questioned that myself for a long time, but in the end it was what the first Dragon King wished for his most prized creations. He wanted to see progress used by magic, and he wanted to see what humanity would do with the large amount of freedom they would be given. The power to shape their own destinies could not be found in a book that told you it was wrong for you to do most of the things in your life. The Book of God, the Bible, the Sanskrit texts and the Quran, they all saw magic as evil, for the almighty deity had made magic a taboo act. Anything that was based upon magic was seen to be against God's word, and well, that didn't sit right with the dragons who did everything through magic. So, as mentioned before, God, and all things associated with him, began to fade when Merlin performed his task of showing the world the power of the dragons. The belief in everything he had done to make people believe in him, in his works, his son's works. All of it began to disappear at a rapid rate, and within the course of a few years, religion was literally non-existent. But if heaven and hell were concepts that were now lost to the universe due to the faith in their existence being lost with those of the various religions, then why is it that they still exist today? Gaia asked. Also, wouldn't the demons not exist either, since hell was forged by the faith in heaven? With the faith in heaven and hell lost, the belief in the existence of angels and demons would be gone as well, the white-haired primordial said. Though religion died out, humans and even the other creatures of the world all strove to attain a realm beyond that of the physical plane. So, Merlin used his powers as the first mage to craft heaven and hell, making them actual realms of existence that were joined to the earth in order to reward or punish those who died and would need to move on to the spiritual realm of existence. As for angels and demons still existing, well, if you believe in heaven and hell, you believe in the creatures that are said to inhabit those realms as well. It's as simple as that. So, angels and demons, the two primordials paused when the master of Tartaros nodded his head. Are quite real, Oranos, the master of Tartaros confirmed. Of course, they are just guards and gatekeepers since, like God had once been for the divine dragons, the archangels and Satan were made to be proxies for their dragon creators to oversee the realms when they were to be judged by the dragons themselves. Satan for the darkness dragon and the archangels for the light dragon. So, even though the archangels rule heaven and Satan controls hell, the souls of those who die are to be judged by the dragons of light and darkness. After all, that was their primary role, to ensure the balance of the universe as wielders of the higher elements. The three then came to a stop when they came to the control room. A few holographic screens lined the semicircular wall as a few grunt workers were busy with their jobs. They observed the mechanics of the cube, making sure that everything was in order. They turned and bowed to their master upon taking note of his presence, and the armored man gestured for most of them to return to their menial tasks, but then focused on the two that monitored the outside world. Show them Era's remains and focus on the area where the Magic Council's headquarters used to be. Of course, master. The grunts replied before typing a few holographic keys, and suddenly the view switched from the beautiful scenes of nature to the remnants of the once proud capital city of the magical community. They then tapped on the zooming capabilities, and beneath the large amount of rock that had once been the mountain that the Magic Council HQ had been resting, it was revealed there was a large symbol of some sort. Is that a pentagram? Gaia muttered as she looked at the large circle carved in the earth, a five-pointed star laying within the circle. Large rune markings were carved around the circle, and the archaic look on the runes made it quite apparent that they were no ordinary rune magic runes. That is the gateway seal used by Merlin himself when he had begun to create hell. Era is the magical center of the planet. It's only right that Merlin's magic be located right here in the area where everything revolves around the art itself. The master of Tartaros chuckled. Master. Gaia spoke up before pausing as she looked the blue-eyed man beside her. The primordials looked at each other with apprehension clear in their body language, but Oranos mustered the necessary courage to speak his mind. You know quite a lot about all of this. The primordial of the sky stated. It's a bit odd as to how you would be able to come across this plethora of knowledge concerning a time long since past. I concur with Oranos, master. The glasses-wearing woman brushed aside her blonde lock of hair out of habit. This is quite disturbing. And you believe that I should care about what you feel towards my knowledge? The master of Tartaros snapped. We did not mean anything by it, master. Forgive us for speaking out of turn. Gaia replied immediately as she and Oranos quickly dropped down to their knees and bow. We just meant that Tartaros was created only a few years ago on X777. We? The earth manipulator flinched as her master stamped his foot on the ground directly in front of them. I have waited far too long in this disgustingly cheerful and blissfully ignorant world. I killed the gods and goddesses with my own two hands, using blades forged by a goddess who was too stupid to think that I would ever side with her. You want to know what I need, Oranos? You wish to know what I crave, Gaia? The master of Tartaros stalked towards the two primordials, his massive form casting an even larger shadow over his two most powerful mages. He leaned closer to them and his voice dropped to a dangerously low tone, but the bloodlust and killing intent that accompanied it made it all the more terrifying. I want to see the world scream, to see it burn in a fire that can never be extinguished. All hell will break loose and hell will appear on earth. Humanity will return to the dust that they were born from. The dragons will fall from the skies, and that is why I will do whatever it takes to see it done. Understood, master. Oranos and Gaia remained in their submissive positions until they felt his killing intent subside. Good. Now as my most powerful subordinates, you two will be accompanying me on my trip down through the 9 layers of hell. As you command, master, they replied in unison. But master, how exactly will we enter hell? Uranos asked as he pointed to the pentagram. We don't exactly have a key, do we?
We do not. The key was Merlin himself. Without Merlin's superior magical prowess to constantly keep the gateway seals open, to reach the spiritual planes from the physical plane is quite taxing, hence why, when I initially made my bargain with Satan, I promised him at least 666 panicked souls. These souls were to act as sacrificial offerings to the Lord of Hell himself to grant me entrance to his realm, though I'm quite sure that the Kyuubi gave him more than 666 during its rampage.
Sacrificial offerings. Gaia and Uranos murmured quietly. Their eyes narrowed in thought. Not a minute later did realization dawn on them as they focused on the image of the destroyed city of Era on the holographic screens before them. They looked at their master with wide eyes. The Kyuubi attack.
The primordial of the sky gasped. You used the Kyuubi attack as a way to kill the people of Era and offer them as a sacrifice to Satan.
As expected of you, master. To have planned something so far ahead in time and ensure its success is stunning. Gaia praised her superior. The master of Tartaros smirked. And my deal with the devil has been made. It was time to go to hell. Literally. Prison of the Nine, underground, Daedalus.
You all were born from a creature on par with the dragons. Hashirama asked, his eyes still wide with shock. The artificially created Exceed had been silent for nearly an entire 10 minutes due to having just processed the entirety of the story he had heard from the Nine. That is correct, youngling. Yuki replied with a nod. Now, when we're born, we were actually far closer in personality to our primordial form. The Jubi's bloodlust and power still corrupted our young minds. We saw the numerous beings of Daedalus as beneath us.
Which they were. Kurama commented. We killed a lot of people in those first years, and it took Hagoromo Jiji quite a few years before he was able to rein us in. Yuki continued as if his older brother had not even spoken. How did he manage to do that? If you all were such powerful beings, how did a mere human, albeit a human with magical powers on par with Merlin and Kagaya, manage to tame you all? First off, he didn't tame us. Seiken spoke. He merely got us to calm down. We are beings that are quite empathetic and so we are capable of responding quite deeply to various forms of emotion. Negative emotions were quite the predominant ones and drove out Psyche for those first few years of our creation. It really hit Kurama hard when it was his turn. I got the majority of the Jubi's power. What did you expect? Kurama growled out to his mollusk of a brother. We actually didn't have expectations for you, Nisan, Chome replied. Rhetorical question, Chome. The fox deadpanned and the kabutomushi beetle huffed, her wings buzzing in annoyance. You know, Nisan, Shukaku's right. You need to stop being such a sarcastic ass. I am not, Kurama snapped. Right guys? He turned to his other siblings and his look of pride towards his other siblings was replaced with a deadpan expression as he saw Gyuki, Isobu and Matabi whistling innocent tunes while Kakuo, Seiken and Son Goku merely shrugged and mumbled a few things that sounded like they agreed. I hate you all, with all of my hate. No you don't. Kakuo snorted in amusement. All of my hate, the Kyuubi roared. Alright, that's enough siblings squabble. Hashirama interrupted the fight before turning back to Kurama. So, what happened after you all were made tame by Hagoromo Otsutsuki? Insert music. Shingeki no Kyojin Omake Fadlib. The mighty Kitsune calmed down before settling his massive red eyes upon the black-eyed Exceed before him. We changed. He stated. Over the course of a few hundred years, Hagoromo Jiji put us through the ringer. We learned everything he had learned from his mother, Kagaya, and much more. What about Homura? Though he doesn't sound like an important person after he and Hagoromo worked to beat Kagaya, what did he do?
Make no mistake, youngling, Homura was as wise and powerful as his brother. Son Goku growled out. But you are correct in saying that Homura did not play as dramatic a role in our lives as Hagoromo. Homura had left Daedalus to pass to learn about the other world, Earthland, since he had done his part in making sure Kagaya remained locked away and imparting knowledge to us nine. What did he do on Earthland? He helped them learn about magic and the multiverse, and even taught them our language and writing.
Chome replied. It's a funny way that came about though, because in order to speak with the people who learned an almost completely different manner of speaking and writing, he was forced to learn, and would you have it, he was taught by the first mage himself. He learned the language of Earthland, titled English, by Merlin, and even taught the language of Daedalus in return. Our language is what we use to speak our spells and is the language used to utter the spells of ancient magics such as the Slayer magics. Dragonslayer, Godslayer and Titanslayer. It was also what is used at times by people in conversation, like how we use suffixes such as sama, san, chan, and dono, and titles such as tu-chan, ka-chan, imoudo and otudo. These are all examples of the original language of Daedalus that managed to blend with English. As a result, the two cultures combined and when Camelot's empire rose into power to dominate the world for the next few thousand years. King Arthur's world now spoke a combination of both the ancient Daedalus language and English, creating the language that we, in both dimensions, speak today. Nerd. Matabi coughed into her paw. Hey, I pay attention to Hagoromo-ji-san when he talked about Homura Oji-san's travels. And I am not a nerd. I am an intellectual badass, thank you very much, Chome snapped.
Enough Chome. You're getting off topic. The Gobi no Yumirika interrupted his sisters. As you can see, we learned much from Hagoromo-ji-san when Homura passed along the current language to him to teach Daedalus so that future dimension hoppers can communicate with each other. We learned the language first of course, and so, now that we had become much more
friendly, I guess was the term, we mingled with the populace of Daedalus, watching as the clans dissolved into nothing as the times changed with the era of peace. Through the pursuit of knowledge that we, the Nine, possessed, the segregation and discrimination brought about by the clan wars vanished.
Clans mixed and didn't bind themselves in terms of their clans once created during the clan wars. We turned to become teachers, guardians and, in the eyes of many, deities. We taught them many things and acted as mediators of conflict. We even acted to prevent the fourth Dragon King from getting to his siblings and the other members of the Genso when the Dragon War was going on.
I've heard of that war. It nearly obliterated Earthland, didn't it? Hashirama asked.
Correct, youngling. Matabi nodded. When the Dragon War came about, Hagoromo-ji-sama and Homura Oji-sama both helped in hiding the Genso and Dragonslayers from the fourth Dragon King when the other divine dragons served to distract him from finding them while they trained here in our dimension. It was because the dragons came here to teach them their arts all those years ago that they were more inclined to utter their spells with the original language of Daedalus.
Shukaku golden eyes lit up with amusement. Plus, in my opinion, I think dragons were very much willing to apply to the rule of cool. I mean, you gotta admit. Bijudama sounds way more badass than its English counterpart, Tailed Beast Bomb, right? I don't know. Seiken shrugged. I always thought Tailed Beast Bomb was a pretty nice spell name. But it's a whole syllable less to say, Isobu piped in. Now you're just being lazy, Isobu, Shukaku muttered. Sorry, the Sanbi replied dejectedly to his sand-using brother. Shukaku, don't bully Isobu. Kurama snarled. Shukaku huffed and turned away from the fox. The Kyuubi sighed and rubbed his temples before looking back at Hashirama. Spell names aside, we passed on the teachings that Hagoromo-jiji to the people. To use the power gained from the knowledge we possessed as a means to continue the era of peace that Daedalus has been undergoing. Gyuki nodded. We managed to teach them what it meant to stand as a united nation, but sadly Hagoromo-jiji and Homura Oji were not able to live long enough to see that dream of his become a reality. A nation that eventually became the Kingdom of Daedalus, ruled by a just and righteous man who founded the royal family when the people began to found their own forms of government. With peace now seen as infallible, we believed we had done what Hagoromo-jiji wished for his people. So, 100 years ago, we decided we should create our own people in a way similar to how the dragons created humanity. We created the Kingdom of the Exceed, though because Matabi wouldn't stop whining about it until she had her way, we were forced to make the Exceed as a race of anthropomorphic cats. The Hachibi and his other 7 siblings all directed deadpan stared at the Nibi childishly stuck her tongue out at the Hachibi like the powerful and wise being that she was. To act as our proxies. Hashirama's eyes widened. Why you created the Exceed? How? You underestimate the powers we possess, youngling. Shukaku glared at the Mokuton user before releasing a scoff. We are the 9. If we are together, we can do practically anything. Our Exceed. Kurama continued. They were to be the only species in all of Daedalus that would be able to use magic in the entire dimension, and as a result, due to them being recognized as our creations, they too were seen as deities. The Exceed were worshipped and loved by all, and we took our own Exceed forms to remain on a lone floating island which lay above Daedalus's own kingdom. Extalia. Hashirama stated. The floating island kingdom of the Exceed which floats above the kingdom of Daedalus. Correct. Once Extalia has been thoroughly developed, in essence, we retired from our duties as teachers and gods, and merely took the role of guardians when things got too hectic for our Exceed to handle. Nanabi explained. It was a very nice life. A bit of nostalgia came over the 9 as they recalled their history. But, if that were the case, then what on Daedalus could have forced you all to abandon our world for Earthland? The 9 glared at Hashirama, but the Mokuton spell user was genetically engineered to be their equal, and eventual superior. Though the question as to whether or not he was stronger than them was still up in the air since he didn't actually win and Kurama, Chome, Matabi, Shukaku and Kakuo didn't actually lose since the anima opened up to take them back before they could truly finish the fight. The samurai armor-wearing Exceed took the glares without any sort of reaction before he turned to Isobu when the giant sea monster spoke. We didn't abandon the world, youngling. We fled for our safety. You have been saying you fled for your safety and freedom for quite a while now. It's getting old. Sorry, Isobu muttered as he turned his single eye away from the deadpan stare given to him by Hashirama. Oi, no one bullies Isobu but me, Shukaku snapped. You don't get to bully Isobu either, dumbass, Yuki snorted angrily through his nostrils like an angry bull. Fuck you, Yuki, The sand using tanuki roared before his enraged expression focused back on the smaller exceed before him. And as for you, if you believed us and accepted that it was the truth, then you wouldn't have to keep hearing it. Shukaku growled as he punched his spherical prison. You want to know why we abandoned our home 40 years ago, you little runt? Well, it's because of your damnable king. I will not allow you to belittle King Faust. Hashirama's cold glare could have froze lava, but the Ichibi paid it no heed. 60 years after we created the Exceed, the royal family's kings came and went, and the recent king, the sixth king of Aeolus known as Faust. Utabi shuddered. From the look in his eyes, his mannerisms, it was obvious something was different about him. Something far different from the kings that were his predecessors. He loved his people and would do anything for them. But that was ended up being the problem. The six-tailed slug frowned as his eye stalks drooped a bit. Kurama sighed. We are the rulers of Extalia, and even though we weren't entirely involved with it, we are still omnipresent throughout the kingdom, and so we heard everything that went on in the castle prior to our meeting with King Faust. It all started with King Faust coming to Extalia and meeting with Queen Shagad.
Insert music. 2 steps from Hell Caradras. Flashback.
Extalia, Aeolus, year X 744. The kingdom of Extalia was a magnificent floating castle with cobblestone streets and well-made pieces of architecture that were on par with those within the kingdom of Aeolus. There were even some which surpassed that level of beauty, one of which was the castle of the Exceed Council and their current queen, Shagad, and her advisors. Like all castles, the castle of Extalia was breathtaking in its appearance and rested upon a large mountain-like land formation, thus giving the occupants of the castle a fantastic view of the colorful houses of its civilians below, and the rest of the dimension of Aeolus. With bright white walls and bright pink-colored roofs, the castle was made to be the landmark of the entire floating island, as it should be since it was the home of the royalty and the ministers.
Shagad sat upon her throne within the castle. She had white fur and gray eyes, with diamond patterns dotted around them, as well as a piercing on her left ear. She wore a flowing, multi-layer dress with excessive ruffles on the back. Because of the size of her garb, very little could be seen in her appearance as King Faust was allowed to look upon her, raising up from his kneeling position within the center of the throne room.
Queen Shagad, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have an audience with you.
It is of no consequence to me to hold a conversation with you, King Faust. The beautiful white-furred feline smiled at the human before her. So, what is it that you wished to speak to me in person? Surely speaking to the ministers would have sufficed. Whatever it is that plagues your mind. I am not so sure that would have, your majesty. The king's beady black eyes then gained a seriousness within them, and that same expression was mirrored by the queen of Extalia.
Very well. Speak. She spoke with authority befitting of a ruler, a tone Faust met with his own speech. I realized the step-by-step process needed to bring this about, so I took everything I had to make an audience with you because I need for this specific thing to happen in order for me to bring about the happiness of my people in my kingdom. Shagad raised an eyebrow as Faust took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. I wish for an audience with the 9. No, was the immediate reply. Queen Shagad, please, I just want a few moments of their time to discuss. No means no, King Faust. We in Extalia were created by the 9 to act as their proxies, and I, the Queen of Extalia, am the ears, eyes and voice of the 9. My words are to be treated as their own. You will not be allowed to see the 9, so whatever it is you wish to speak to them about, you may talk about it to me. Magic. He stated. That has been the backbone of our world, our entire dimension, the entire universe. Magic has ushered in an era of amazing progress for our world, but over the course of many years, magic has dwindled and has become a non-renewable resource. The humans of our generation are unaware as to what it is exactly that led to us having such finite magic, for it was stated that we didn't have much even when you, the Exceed, were created by the 9, as only they know the truth of our world. Queen Shagad stroked the armrest of her throne with a paw as she listened. My people, they need magic energy to power their appliances, to go about their daily lives, and even I, their king, am a slave to the energy source that is needed by my entire kingdom to survive. You, the Exceed, are capable of producing magic energy within your own bodies, and so you do not have this problem, but I need to remedy the one within my kingdom. I need magic, Queen Shagad, and I believe that the almighty Exceed can provide it. As the proxy of the 9, surely you can help my people. Shagad sighed, her gray eyes showing a great deal of pity for the gray-haired king. I am sorry, King Faust, but I cannot grant your request to give humanity any magic energy. The 9 have forbade me, and the entire species of Exceed, from ever allowing humans the ability to have more magic energy than what they have now. Queen Shagad, please, he exclaimed. I only ask this of you so as to continuously sustain Aeolus. King Faust, do not embarrass yourself. This is unbecoming of a. You think I care about status and protocol for a king, you dirty cat? Faust snapped, his eyes immediately bearing a fire of rage. If you will not give me the power I need, the power for my people, then I will continue to hound you until you agree. I will do whatever it takes to achieve that power, Exceed, even if it means I have to bring the flames of war to Extalia. Shagget's eyes widened and she looked down at the enraged king before her, the madness in his eyes becoming quite apparent. However, before the king could make his dramatic exit, she rose up from her seat and stretched an arm out to him. "Wait." King Faust paused as he glanced back to see the defeated look on her face as she dropped her arm. "All right. I'll take you to them. I'll take you to the 9. Faust nodded and his mad expression vanished as quickly as it had come. Shagget rose from her throne and the small Exceed walked through the castle, Faust moving after her dutifully. She led him through winding passageways and lengthy hallways, up and down spiraling staircases that served to greatly confuse the bearded king until he and his guide came to a stop in front of a large doorway. The doors were not made of the same material as the rest of the castle, made of extremely weathered-looking stone that was colored various shades of brown, gray and black to signify its age. The Queen of Extelia raised her paw and she activated her magic, Faust watching in amazement as the glowing blue energy surrounded the paw. She placed her glowing paw against the doorway and a small hissing sound was heard. Shagget removed her paw to reveal the glowing blue paw print which she left behind. A large image of a ring surrounded by 9 magatama appeared on the stone door before a loud clack echoed through the castle. The stone doors dragged noisily against the floor as they opened inwards. They opened only slightly, enough for the 2 members of royalty to enter the room before it closed behind them, trapping them in the darkness. Faust and Shagget remained silent as they moved forwards. The gray-eyed Exceed then held out her paw, placing it against Faust's stomach, and her fellow monarch came to a halt behind her. It was then that a brilliant golden light appeared to illuminate the large room they were in. It was very much blank, no furniture, no decorations, only the massive pillars of golden-colored stone and gold-tiled floor. Faust's eyes widened when he looked down at the floor and saw the golden glow had been emanating from it, directly beneath their feet. The golden light then released 9 lines that moved outwards and then began tracing a massive ring around them. Outside of the ring, 9 glowing symbols that looked very much like magatama appeared. And then, the golden glow retreated into the center of the room once more. It formed a small ball when it went into Shagget's paws. Only the symbols that formed on the floor were visible to the eyes of the 2 members of monarchy. The ground then began to shake as what sounded like thunder echoed around the now barely lit room. Faust shivered as he suddenly felt an astounding amount of pressure that filled the now tense room, bringing him to his knees. He gasped when he looked around the room, noticing that Shagget was completely unaffected by the atmosphere of the dimly lit room. Then, from the shadows came the towering figures of the one he wished for an audience with. He turned to his right as the beasts began to appear, surprisingly doing so by tail number. The Ichibi no Tanuki, the Nibi no Bakaneko, the Sanbi no Kyodai game, the Yanbi no Saru, the Gobi no Umerika, the Rokubi no Namikuji, the Nanabi no Kabutomushi, the Hachibi no Yushioni, and then he found he had ended up spinning in a circle as he came to a stop. The terrifying blood-colored eyes of the Kyubi no Yoko stared at him. "Oh, Almighty 9. I beseech you to hear my words. I am King Faust, the recent king of Edalis, and—" "We know who you are, human," Matabi interrupted him. "Of course. My apologies, Nibi-sama." Faust bowed his head. "And we also are aware of why you are here," Isobu added. "We are omnipotent on our island of Extelia, so please be aware of the fact that we heard every word you said to Sagat." Every word? Sanbi-sama?" Faust gulped audibly. That gulp was nowhere near loud enough to match the fear you should be feeling now. "You arrogant little piece of human shit," Shukaku roared. You come to the kingdom of the 9, you come to talk discussing wanting magic. You threaten our proxy with war and you still think that after we observed everything you just said to Shagget that we would still grant you the usage of our magic. I have never met a more disgustingly arrogant human." Son Goku pounded his fist against the ground, making it shake as Faust now fought to reclaim his balance. "In the times before you began your rule, Faust, humans of Edalis once wielded magic. However, those failed to know history are doomed to repeat it." Kakuo spoke wisely. The ancient humans of Edalis were denied magic because of the greed and delusions of grandeur that came with the use of it. The people of Earthland are prime examples of such humans, and we didn't want that for the people that we were tasked with teaching our ways to. You have been a kind and generous king to your people, Faust. Seiken gave the elderly king a small smile. I am quite sure that in spite of our denial to adhere to your request, you will continue to be a good king to your people in that way, for your people, for your son. But, please, Kyubi-sama. Faust turned to the eldest of the 9. His pleading growing ever more apparent as he raised his hands as if he were praying to the kitsune. The answer is still, no, Faust. Kurama growled, now get out. Insert music. Shingeki no Kyojin XLTT, Extelia, Edalis, year X744. 2 days later fires raged and screams echoed across the dimension of Edalis as countless soldiers, all of whom were trained in the art of combat, flew through the air atop their mounts. The legions, massive horned beasts with teeth and claws that were capable of tearing flesh from bone with ease, did what they were commanded to do as they ripped through one of the burning towns. However, as the Exceed died, they were figuratively spat upon as a massive form crushed their bodies beneath its equally massive mechanical foot, leaving behind a large footprint in the ground of Extalia. However, all of the carnage and destruction came to an end when the 9 appeared before the town. Shukaku kept the ground forces in place as he turned the ground beneath their feet to sand. Chome zipped through the air and sliced all the legions to pieces while catching the human riders and resting in a pile in the middle of the awestruck army. The 9 stood at the entrance of the town before Son Goku summoned forth a wall of lava that immediately cooled to form a thick, giant wall of solid black rock to further halt their efforts to kill the inhabitants of Extalia.
Silence now reigned supreme. The 9 looked down at the humans, and all it took was that look from the towering behemoths. The retreating Exceed cheered for their creators while the humans were either frozen with fear or immediately began turning tail. However, Kurama and his siblings did not pay attention to the grunts of the forces and instead focused their eyes on their commanding officer.
Faust! Kurama roared as his crimson eyes stared at the mechanical dragon armor that was Dorma Anum. The silver-armored behemoth of metal roared, the crimson light of its eyes shining brightly, even brighter than the flames that surrounded its form. You brought this upon yourself, Kurama-sama. I need that magic and I will take it from you and your siblings personally. My kingdom will have infinite magic and all will know the name of King Faust for generations to come. No act of wanting power would warrant the use of Dorma Anum. Faust, Matabi hissed loudly. Your predecessors tried to use Dorma Anum as a way to regain magic energy for the people many years ago and they failed. They realized their mistakes and they sealed it away. The 23rd article of the Imperial Constitution of Aeolus was made specifically because of Dorma Anum, and you broke it. You are a fool, Faust, Yuki bellowed. You doomed the entire dimension because you awakened that monstrosity. Silence. Faust's voice boomed from the loudspeakers built into the Dragon Knight. I know I have done, and I know what must be done for my kingdom, for the power of Aeolus. I will not collapse and I will no longer be a slave to you 9 and your kind. End flashback. Dorma Anum was as terrible and dangerous as it was when it was first activated. It nullified our magic attacks and due to being made of a very powerful and dense metal, its hide was practically impenetrable. We took Dorma Anum away from Extalia so that the other humans and Exceed wouldn't be caught in the crossfire and it seemed as if we would have lost everything due to Dorma Anum drawing in the magic energy from across the dimension to keep itself going. Kurama told Hashirama. He sparked the fires of war and made the cycle of hatred begin anew in our peaceful world. You can't blame King Faust for what he was forced to do, Hashirama shouted at Kurama. He wanted to supply magic to his kingdom, to help his people and ensure happiness for all. You can't. That is no excuse. There is no excuse for there to be more meaningless bloodshed and war. The Gyuki roared and punched his prison. Our Exceed, they were made to be figureheads. They aren't fighters. None of them are because they were made in a world of peace. And I'm sorry to say this, youngling, but Faust ruined that peace, Isobu stated. We told you what Kaguya did, Chome buzzed her wings angrily. We told you what happened as a result of a human holding magic in Aeolus, and we told that humans of Earthland are prime examples of what would happen today if Aeolus still had unlimited Eternano in the atmosphere. It took us all we had just to keep Faust from destroying Extalia and his own kingdom in the effort to take our magic for his own. Shukaku continued. But in the end, we were pushed into a corner because somebody didn't want to kill him.
All eyes turned to Kurama and the mighty fox remained strong in his stance. And I stand by it. What? I thought you ran away. Hashirama said.
I never run, youngling. But in this case, I made an exception because of Hagoromo Jiji. Kurama frowned deeply. Hagoromo Jiji said he would be the one to establish peace and order in a war-torn world when Kaguya was defeated. I could have killed Faust. I would have been so easy for us if I stopped holding back. The Kitsune clenched his hand like forepaws into tight fists and Hashirama's eyes widened when he saw Kurama's claws ignite with brightly colored flames. The crimson fires suddenly burned a bit brighter and Hashirama's eyes widened when he saw the base of the flame suddenly began to glow a bit brighter than the rest, its colors shifting quite noticeably. Was that gold? The armor-wearing Exceed found the Kitsune's flames to be extinguished at that point as the wood dragon prison sucked the magic right out of them, so he didn't question it any further. I could have ripped apart that armor and taken him out and it would have been so easy. Kurama's claws twitched. I could snap his neck, eat him, burn him, impale him on my claws and it would all be over in a flash. But then he would be martyr and I would only incite more war and more conflict, ruining the peace Hagoromo Jiji worked so desperately to achieve. And why didn't you? Surely one king dead would not inhibit the belief and fear people had of you. Because I trusted Jiji's faith in humanity more than the faith I had in what the outcome would be if I made Faust a memory, youngling. Hagoromo Jiji said he would be the one to establish peace and order. He taught us 9 what it meant to ensure that peace and order would remain, even in his passing, and we followed those teachings throughout time. We imparted it all to the humans and Exceed. But I saw then and there that we were products because of conflict. We were power incarnate, and so long as we remained there, the cycle of hatred would continue and the wars would start all over again. So, I adhered to Gigi's words of non-violence, and I used the powers he gave me when he passed to forcibly open the anima, and I took my siblings and I went to Earthland. So, King Faust pushed you to run to Earthland? Hashirama asked. 9 nodded at the Mokuton user. But, he would never. You still forced his hand, he just wanted to help. You're blinded by your own loyalty, Hashirama. Kakuo spoke. Kurama saved us and as an added bonus, saw our escape as a punishment for trying to take our power, knowing that Faust would never truly reach us so long as he could never find us. You still did it out of spite against the king, Hashirama hissed. I did it to protect my family. Dorma Enum sucks the magic energy out of the atmosphere, and that also includes the magic energy the 9 of us possessed. I would not have my siblings be turned into bodiless threads of consciousness that would be lost to the winds. Kurama's large head cast a massive shadow over Hashirama. Your king is a tyrant under the guise of a saint. He will not rest until he sees humanity above the rest. Extalia still exists, and he will bring about another war to see our creations burn, Hashirama. He has his pieces in play. ECES on the board. Hashirama raised an eyebrow, and his own siblings were confused by his statement. Kurama? They all questioned their canine brother as a wide vulpine grin appeared on his face. Sitcha, Daedalus the Apocalypse Dragonslayer sneezed loudly, snapping him awake from his deep slumber. He gasped and panted as he found the sheets of the bed he was once under were now flung off of the bed. He winced slightly and looked down at his bandaged form, feeling the pain of his blue eyes widened. Injuries, he thought. Indeed, he was injured. Nothing was broken, but he was definitely hurt enough to warrant bed rest. The last time that happened was during the fight with Kurama between the Grimoire Heart Mages, Zankro and Azuma, and Han and Kakuo. He moved into a sitting position and planted his bare feet against the wooden floor before seeing that whoever it was that took him in had had enough decency to leave his underwear on. His bruised body protested against his actions, but he climbed out of the bed and walked over to the nearby window. His sapphire orbs narrowed as he observed the area. He looked up and spied a sign which was swinging noisily in the wind. Sitcha Bar and Diner. I've never heard of Sitcha, he muttered to himself before taking in the architecture. Sitcha was very much similar in appearance to Tully Village, but some of the newer-looking buildings gave it a feel that was similar to that of Clovertown. With a mixture of dirt roads and cobblestone pathways, it did really seem like the two towns of Earthland had been merged into one. I have no time to stand around, I need to find Kurama. He then went to draw upon the power of his parents' seal, but only a small flicker of red came to the surface before it vanished from view. My magic. Where's my magic energy? He held up his hands and made a series of hand motions. No pocket dimension formed. He swiped his hand across the air. A small gust was the result, but the wind was not bending to his will as well as it should have. He tried to summon his Eternano in its purest form. The Rasengan was dead to him. Finally, he raised his right hand, completely wrapped in bandages from whatever injury it was that he suffered, probably another bruise up in a tiger claw position, and he drew upon the power of his father. For a second, it seemed as if that would be what he had at his disposal as flickering embers of blue and black magic energy came to him, until it was revealed that that was all he could manage. His magic was all but dead, and when he tried to take an Eternano from the atmosphere, he found that there was none for him to take. It was barren, a magic energy wasteland. Having dominion over the aspect of the universe that was energy, he still found himself capable of regaining his vitality when he took in the heat of the sun and the flow of the wind. But without a solid backbone of Eternano from the atmosphere, he had no magic. He was a magic-less mage, and given the nature of his surroundings, his brain had raced through various thoughts, eventually leading him to conclude that even though his battle with Kinkaku took him across time and space, there was only one dimension that he was aware of that could literally have no Eternano in its atmosphere to generate magic. He growled and cracked the wood of the wall as he punched it in anger. I'll kill Void Dragon. I will make sure of that, but to think I'd end up in Daedalus of all places. That means either Void Dragon opened the void and I fell here, which could explain my injuries. Or I still fell and received injuries, but from falling through the anima. He hadn't a very detailed education from Acnologia with regards to Daedalus, and though Kurama filled in a lot of the blanks over the course of his 90 years of training in the pocket dimension onwards, the Kitsune was still not very knowledgeable about the societies that existed outside of the kingdoms of Extalia and Daedalus. Thus, Sitcha was still to be considered unknown territory. The lack of Eternano in the atmosphere, I didn't expect it to be this low. There's practically nothing left to form my spells. He then looked around the rather dull-looking room. There were 2 beds, signifying 2 occupants. There was a bathroom off to the far end of the room, and in the corner opposite to it was a door that was now opening. When the door was fully open, he struck. He was a blur of motion to the unknown, and he raised his hand, lashing out with it with trained speed and precision. A yelp of surprise and pain was quickly silenced as Naruto's harsh grip was located around the attacker's throat. He spun his body around, ignoring the pain due to the adrenaline he was currently running on, slamming the person against the wooden wall. His lack of magic prevented the natural reflex of his blue irides to shine within the ethereal white light whenever he was threatened, but the eyes created from training with a dragon was enough. The brown eyes of the person before him were quickly filled with fear as Naruto bared his sharper-than-average canines. However, as he looked over the person in his grip, he came to realize that he knew that person from somewhere. His eyes shifted as he racked his brain, searching for the name that matched the face of his captive. And then it clicked. "Ileana?" he asked. "Wait, then that means Portia? Your older sister, Portia. She works in this bar?" The young blue-haired girl froze at the mention of her name before nodding slowly. He released the girl and the 15-year-old fell unceremoniously down to the ground. She gritted her teeth in pain from the harsh landing, but looked back up at the whisker-marked man. "Geez, is this how you thank all the people who saved you?" she coughed out as she rubbed her neck. I apologize." He turned away from the blue-haired girl. "I thought you were someone else." "Oh," was the intelligent reply. "It's okay I guess. I mean, you look pretty banged up. Your right arm was pretty banged up and you had a lot of bruising. But Portia Ne-chan fixed you up pretty good with her jack-of-all-trades know-how. By the way, She looked up at the tall blonde and blushed heavily as she took note of his state of dress and his well-built physique. You should put on some clothes. Tu-chan had left a few things behind before he ran out on us, so I took those to use since your clothes were pretty much torn beyond repair. Also, don't take off the bandages yet. You've been out for practically a whole day and you're still injured." "Thanks, and I'll keep that in mind," he said before he followed her pointing finger in the direction of the bathroom. As he walked off, he frowned deeply, looking at his bandaged right arm. It was always a great blow to his pride when he was made vulnerable. Having a healing factor prevented that, but without it he felt so weak, so very mortal. He then glanced out of the corner of his eye when the sound of footsteps following after his own were heard. Ileana was a hormonal teenager with a physically attractive young man in her presence, might as well try to make the most of it. She followed after the blonde, but she bit back a cry of surprise when the door slammed in her face and was locked with an audible click. She then made her way over to the bed and began to fix it up. It was her bed after all. "So, what's your name?" "Naruto," was the instant reply. "Well, Naruto, how did you know my name? How do you know Ne-chan?" she asked as she began to fix the sheets. "Not many women I know with blue hair," he replied. The young girl wrapped a lock of hair around her finger at that comment. The man did have a point. "Well, that still sounds pretty stalker-ish. But I'll be willing to forgive you for that and for what you did to me earlier if you pay me now." "And what exactly did I do that warrants forgiveness?" he asked with a sarcastic tone. The door then unlocked and she looked up fluffing the pillows as the son of two wizard saints finished adjusting his new clothes. He wore a black, long-sleeved shirt with an orange outs and a pair of black boots. A red band was wrapped around the upper part of his right arm while he readjusted the golden flame necklace from Seiko. Speaking of which, he never knew if she survived the heart attack or not. He also never got the chance to clear the air with Ino, Shikamaru and Choji. He still had to see Ayame to see how she was faring, and hopefully shared the same fate he expected of Sakura's mother. "You wounded a lovely maiden," she exclaimed, snapping him out of his thoughts. The blue-eyed Dragonslayer snorted and raised an eyebrow. "Maiden my ass, TT Ibeo," he muttered. "What kind of a maiden requires payments from people she saves of her volition? You try to support two people with a shitty rent on even shittier tips." She snarled. "Anyway, come on. I need to show Portia Ne-chan that you're awake now with payment pending." The son of two wizard saints followed behind her. He walked down the spiraling staircase that led to the noisy bar and diner that lay below his feet. It was the middle of the day, so it was relatively quiet for an alcohol-serving establishment, so it was a welcome atmosphere of relative calm and serenity, mixed with glasses smashing, music blaring and face-breaking. He ignored the stares he was receiving from his uncommon entrance, instead focusing on his to-do list. Get information and get Kurama back, he thought. And what better place to achieve the first half of his goal than at the place where loose lips were so common it was basically an occupation for the people there. The bar. He took his place at the stool right at the far left. Acting a bit on childish impulse, Ileana ran up to the seat beside him, giggling as she spun around on the swiveling seat before coming to a stop when she caught the sound of the bartender clearing her throat. His blue eyes came to immediately fixate on the woman's bust before traveling upwards to see her face. Well, despite Edelus supposedly being a place where opposite personalities of people are the majority, it's rather nice to see at least some things don't change, he thought as deja vu hit him like one of Agnologia's tail swipes. Blue hair and brown eyes while dressed in her trademark bartender outfit, Portia looked at the spiky-haired blonde with a bored look in her eyes. "Illy, what have I told you about bringing in strays?" she asked with a monotonous tone of voice. "Much. At least some things don't change much," he corrected his former thought. Her little sister, he couldn't say what was different about her since he never had the chance to speak with her, but Portia was clearly an opposite personality. The bubbly and flirtatious woman that had been his first meeting in Tully Village was now a boring and rather dull woman. Also, when they first met, she called him handsome, but here he was a stray animal. Though that could have been attributed to his current appearance. Not to bring them, but he knew who we were even though we never met before, Ileana said before leaning closer to her sister. I think he's a stalker. Naruto's eye twitched as he still heard her words. Is that so? Well then, stalker-san. How would you know about us? I've seen a lot of faces, but I sure as hell would remember seeing one like you. Especially a blonde. Blondes aren't common here in Shippuden, she said, her monotone gaining a bit of emotion in it. Like I told your little sister, your hair color is hard to forget. As for why you wouldn't remember me. Well, let's just say I've done a pretty good job of remaining in the background and keeping a low profile. Portia and Ileana looked at Naruto for a few moments before the elder brunette shrugged her shoulders. Works for me, so, what do y'all want? Information, he replied with a serious tone. The blue-haired woman sighed before resting her arms down on the table, her impressive cleavage practically staring at him. Also, he needs to pay us a few thousand jewels, Ileana added in. Still not a maiden, he said, earning a pout from the cute little girl. He was 110 and a half, so in essence, almost everyone would be little in comparison. Well, I can't help you with that, she replied, rolling her eyes. But as for the information, it depends on what do you want to know and what you're willing to pay. Her level of monotone seemed to increase the more she spoke. You know, I actually like Earthland you better, he muttered under his breath. What? The blue-haired woman and her sister raised their eyebrows in confusion. Nothing, he sighed, waving her off. But obviously, I have no money on my person currently. But I can assure you that I have quite a lot stored away, so once I get my information, I will be sure to repay you and your sister for your help and hospitality tenfold. 100-fold, Ileana shouted. Portia groaned at her little sister. Done. The two young women's eyes widened at how easily he agreed. Their looks were priceless, but Naruto was not in the mood to be amused as he continued to speak. So anyway, I want to know if you have any idea where I can find my nakama, someone whom I consider my best friend. His name is Kurama. Getting over the shock of being given large sums of money from a stranger in the near future, Portia shook her head slowly. Can't say I've heard the name before. The blue-haired woman replied. Got a face to go with the name? He has two forms. Either a red and black furred fox with red eyes, most likely having 9 tails, or, his most commonly used one, an exceed wearing a fox costume. He can use magic, giving him size manipulation, pyrokinesis and illusion projections. A period of silence passed between the three. Brown eyes stared directly at the opposing blue ones, and the chatter and sounds of the bar were pretty much white noise to the three of them. The two sisters turned and stared at each other for a few moments, Naruto's serious expression meeting Portia's confused one as she raised an eyebrow. God, she made even that simple task look like it was taxing. Ileana leaned forward and whispered loud enough for him to hear her. Are you on drugs? Ileana asked. If you are, I'll definitely have what you're having, Portia's monotone added. Naruto's left eye twitched rapidly before he planted his face down on the hard wooden table, groaning audibly in frustration. This was not going well. All activity came to a stop in a brief moment, however, when a loud explosion echoed through the air. The son of Agnologia got up from his stool and headed for the door of the bar and diner. Once he was outside, he turned to see a column of smoke and fire followed by what looked a giant tornado that rose up from the ground. He sensed the magic energy within those two elements. Those were probably magic items. Kurama told me that since magic was lost to Daedalus, the dimension had to resort to storing magic energy within Lacrima to use weapons, appliances and other things. So once the magic is used, it seems the Eternano stored within returns to the atmosphere. He felt the Eternano beginning to diffuse through the atmosphere and it was delicious. He took a deep breath and the small amount of magic energy jump-started his magic energy circulation system, though it wasn't enough as he would have liked. It's not a large amount, but it'll be enough for at least one spell, he muttered as he felt the familiar feeling of magic energy circulating through his body. Where are you going, Naruto? Ileana asked when she and a few other patrons came outside to view the explosion. You've done me a great deal of help to look after me, but you obviously aren't aware of who I want to find, he replied. I'll be taking my leave. He then bent his legs and a gray-green magic seal appeared beneath his feet. Shunpo no Kazejin. The wind picked up, swirling to life around him before he pushed off. Those who watched were the very definition of disbelief, as for one moment, Naruto was there and the next. He seemed to vanish into the wind as he used his very first futon spell, Wind God's Flash Step. He raced through the town IE explosion, but he was already feeling the drain. His normal magic energy output was quite large, so it was only natural for him to put a large amount of magic into his spells. His legs moved slower and the world slowly came back into focus. He then went into a slow jog before coming to a stop as he suddenly caught sight of the causes of the explosions, recognizing their sense. Large brown eyes brightened as they saw him before a toothy grin came upon her face. "Oni-san, Sky Dragon, what are you doing here, and more importantly, why are you with them?" Naruto pointed at the surprised and on-guard visages of Lucy and Natsu. Instantly reacting, Lucy whipped out a golden key. "Gate of the Bull, I open thee." "Taurus, Mu," the bovine celestial spirit bellowed as he spun his double-bladed axe with expert handling. The Apocalypse Dragonslayer turned and glared at the celestial spirit before shifting it to Wendy as she chuckled nervously and scratched the back of her head. "It's a pretty long story," she replied. She gulped audibly as Naruto stepped past her, his massive frame exuding an aura of a predator. He cracked his knuckles and bared his claws and fangs. "Well, I'll have the time, but first, I'm in the mood for steak." Flashback. Spy Network HQ, Eastern Fiorian Mountains, Fury 2 days ago. Charlie's eyes widened, her pupils constricting as she suddenly felt a flash of pain. Then a myriad of images went through her mind in succession. "I've spent my life closing the anima, but I can open it as well." Magnolia Town's skies were covered by a swirling vortex, space and time seeming to rupture as it came into existence. "We're going to Edalus." An old man laughed loudly as he stood atop the head of a massive silver-scaled dragon with crimson eyes. "You'll never stop me with the power of the 9 under my control." Exceed and human alike screamed as death and destruction happened all around them. Floating islands fell from their perches, infrastructure was reduced to rubble, blood soaked the lands and a powerful roar echoed throughout the area. It is in their title, they are the only ones capable of defeating it. They can crush dragon bones, break dragon scales and rip apart dragon entrails. Only those who hold the title of Dragonslayer hold the capability of defeating the Dragon Knight. Naruto panted heavily, a streak of blood flowing from his forehead, but though he appeared distressed, his eyes did not show it as the phantasmal image of his draconian father roared behind him. "Tusan, give me strength." Charl released a sudden gasp. She gripped her skull as the images and words she heard had been moving so quickly. It was almost impossible for her to comprehend that it had even happened when it all came to an end. It was as if someone stabbed her brain with electricity. Charl fell off of Wendy's head, but the Sky Dragonslayer stopped walking through the halls of the castle before she quickly caught her friend. "Charl." Wendy looked down at the Exceed with concern. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Charl shook her head, getting rid of the dizziness she felt before looking at Wendy. "Visions." Again, Wendy asked. "What did you see?" "I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. The images are so haphazard and out of order. Remember, I told you my visions are really quite random, so I can never tell if my visions are from the past or the near or distant futures. The voices, I can remember quite well, though most of them I couldn't recognize. The last one was obviously Naruto." "Oni-san? Does something happen to him? Is he okay?" Wendy fired off the questions in rapid succession. But Charl simply raised her paw. It was a little technique she picked up over the years of being with Wendy. Whenever she got hyper or something related to it, Charl had learned to release an air of authority, like when a teacher would quiet a classroom of students by simply entering the room. "I can't say for certain what it is that's going that he is involved in the vision, but he sounded a bit distressed, I guess. He said, 'Tusan, give me strength.' I can't really discern what that would mean for the situation he's in," Charl replied. "As for what I remember seeing, the only thing that stuck was the image of a giant portal in Magnolia Town. Something will happen in Magnolia Town, and there was something about Dragonslayers too." "Dragonslayers?" The brown-eyed girl raised an eyebrow. Charl nodded in confirmation. "Yes, so with Haku-san and Fu-san here, I think that since you had to go and get some medical supplies to perform Yugito's operation, we need to take advantage of the situation," the white-furred Exceed said. "We'll take them with us to Magnolia Town to get the supplies, and in the process, we'll check out what's going on." "Alright." Wendy nodded stiffly. End flashback. Insert music. RWBY Volume 2 Best Day Ever. Sitcha, Edalus. In the end, Fu-san, Haku-san, Charl and I happened to have arrived at the same time the anima opened, and we took the opportunity to go into it," Wendy said as she had finished spinning her tail. "And where are Ice Dragon, Charl and Wind Dragon now?" Naruto asked. "Don't know." Wendy shrugged. "We all lost each other, and I happened to find Lucy-san and Natsu-san." "That reminds me. Lucy, we lost track of Happy," Natsu piped in. "You. Hush." Naruto bopped Natsu on the head with the base of Taurus's battle axe. Lucy and Wendy sweat dropped. When Taurus and Natsu had both moved into action against the Ogo no Fujin, things immediately went south when Taurus was tripped and his axe was swiped away from him. A few powerful swings of the golden weapon to both of them, and a kick to the groin of the perverted bull, brought both fairy tale combatants to the floor. It didn't help that Natsu was still a bit out of his element when he found he couldn't use his fire, despite the fact that Mistogen had explained it to him beforehand. "I couldn't care less about that one. Also, Naruto looked down and slammed the base of Taurus's battle axe against the top of Natsu's head again. Stop squirming and take your loss with some pride, Fire Dragon. You're sitting on my neck, you bastard. I didn't even want to come. The blonde celestial spirit mage muttered as she sat obediently on the ground beside the blue-haired Dragonslayer. She performed a forced closure and the bull spirit quickly vanished in a flash of gold, causing Natsu to fall to the ground and cushioning Naruto's own fall. And we're sorry for attacking you. Can you please get off Natsu now? Naruto sighed before nodding and raising himself off of the defeated Fire Dragonslayer. He grabbed the scarf-wearing Dragonslayer by said scarf and tossed the bruised Dragonslayer at the feet of Lucy. The pink-haired mage groaned as Lucy moved to his aid. Naruto then walked past them and Wendy immediately skipped after him, holding the elbow area of his sleeve. We're leaving to go find Kurama. Okay, Oni-san. The daughter of Grandine replied happily. Wait, so you're going to leave us here? Lucy asked. Naruto and Wendy paused as they looked back at the celestial spirit mage. Why shouldn't I? Well, Lucy racked her brain for some reason she could use to prevent the most powerful criminal on Earthland to leave her alone with a magic-less Natsu in an unknown world. You're far more reliable and stronger than Natsu. What? Natsu exclaimed. Lucy quickly turned and gave him a sharp look that told him to just shut up and play along. The son of Igneel scowled and turned away from the blonde, but he remained quiet and let his friend go along with her plan. I mean, even without magic in this dimension, you were still able to beat Taurus. That's not much of an accomplishment. The blue-eyed man deadpanned. He is far too distracted by your body to keep focused on the fight. For Lucis. If that's not the height of perversion, then I don't know what is. I told that stupid bull not to use that as a battle cry. Lucy muttered, looking off to the side and punching the bridge of her nose in annoyance. That's true. She replied nervously with a sweat drop. But, I do have other celestial spirits to use. Though I don't know why, I am the only person here who can properly use magic, and I think that it will be beneficial to you for us to work together and not die. Go on. Lucis' eyes brightened as she earned the attention of Acnologia's Dragonslayer. You're extremely intelligent, have battle smarts, and with your strength allowing you to fight on part and do as much damage as you did when you fought Master Makarov 3 months ago. Play to his pride and sing him songs of praise. The oldest trick in the book when it came to appealing to an enemy to become an ally. I'm sure you would be quite a boon to fight alongside you. True. So vain, she and Natsu thought with sweat drops. But I still don't see the point in an alliance with you two. You obviously have a more noble goal in mind, don't you? It couldn't be by happenstance that you appeared in Edelus. Yeah, Natsu said. We're looking for Roshi-sensei and Mistogen. Mistogen, Wendy and Naruto looked each other and then back to the fairy tale mages. While I'm unaware as to who this Roshi person is, I am aware as to who Mistogen is. Would be looking for one of your S-class mages here? It's pretty complicated, Natsu said. I had trouble understanding it since there was a lot of talk about parallel worlds and stuff. I didn't get most of it. Well, that's not much of a surprise. Lucy and Naruto muttered simultaneously, causing them to glance at each other. Naruto raised an eyebrow while Lucy quickly averted her eyes from meeting the ones of the man who could kill her. Oi, Igneel taught me to fight and read, not how to understand the workings of the universe. Natsu pouted. Anyway, if you're not gonna help us find Roshi-sensei, then Lucy and I can do it on our own. I'll find Son Goku too. Son Goku? Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Your sensei is a partner with one of the 9? I don't actually know much about this 9 stuff, but Son did say he and his siblings were referred to as that. Natsu replied. Roshi-sensei came to the guild to talk to Mistogen and then a lot of stuff happened. Mistogen turned out to be from Edelus, and then Roshi-sensei knew about it. Master and Roshi-sensei started fighting a bit, and then all of a sudden there's a hole in the sky because of Mistogen, and Lucy and I are here in this stupid place. While this information is quite something, it still does not grant me the feeling of necessity to form a partnership with you all. If anything, it would be better to abandon you both and look for your sensei since our goals are aligned. He wishes to find Son Goku, while I wish to search for Kurama. Natsu gritted his teeth as he climbed to his feet. Look, we don't want to work with you and you don't want to work with us. We get that. But we both have people we want to find. You with Kurama, and me and Lucy want to find our guild mates. The best way to do that would be to first find Mistogen, who knows his way around Edelus. Plus he said that he had a way to help us fight off Faust when we got there. If you stick with us and help us find I'm sure he can do that for you too. Even after being defeated you still have enough fire in you to keep up the empty threats. As expected of you, Fire Dragon. Naruto then extended a hand. However, your initial argument does hold merit. Very well, I can come to an agreement to hold a temporary ceasefire. Ceasefire? The 2 Dragonslayers and his fellow blonde tilted their heads in confusion. I had no intention of fighting you all in the first place, but since Fire Dragon wants to speak words of combat, in order to prevent this, the arrangement we have is to be defined as a ceasefire. Of course, this will be temporary, for I'm quite sure our original relationship between myself and your guild will continue once we reach back to Earthland. No argument there. Lucy muttered. Though any funny business, and I don't care if you're strong, I'll find some way to kick your ass. Natsu growled as he and his fellow Dragonslayer firmly shook hands. An empty threat, but I will take it in stride for the sake of our agreement. Now then, Fire Dragon. Your sensei is a partner with an Exceed, Naruto stated. Dragonslayer? Yeah, he's the Lava Dragonslayer and son of Volcanus, the Lava Dragon. Volcanus? Naruto's eyes widened at that note. Volcanus is quite a powerful dragon from what I've been told. Older and stronger than most of the Genso. He is one of the few who has lived since the days of the Dragon War during the reign of the 4th Dragon King. Roshi must be quite a strong Dragonslayer and mage on a whole if he was made the Dragonslayer of such a dragon. I don't know what that stuff about a Dragon War, but yeah. Roshi-sensei's a badass. Natsu stated with pride before gaining a questioning look. How'd you know to guess that Roshi-sensei was a Dragonslayer though? It's just an observation that most mages in Earthland who are partnered with Exceed tend to be Dragonslayers. You, Wendy and myself are prime examples of that. Luce's eyes widened while Natsu unleashed a cry of victory before pointing at his blonde friend. Ha, see? I told you Gajeel and Juvia needed cats. They don't need flying cats, Natsu. And why would they need one anyway? Lucy slapped her pink-haired friend upside the head and Wendy giggled at the interaction between the two. Because it's the principle of the matter, Luce, he exclaimed. It's like you without your keys or Gray without his ice. Dragonslayers need a feline that possesses the ability to soar through the skies at hypersonic speeds. Stop using such big words, Lucy exclaimed. It makes your arguments so much more compelling. Go back to being a dummy. I'm not dumb. Igneel just never taught me to have a wide vocabulary. The Fire Dragonslayer pouted as he began drawing circles in the dirt with his finger. The blue-haired Dragonslayer motioned for her older brother figure to bend down and the blonde did so. Nay, Oni-san, don't you think Lucy-san and Natsu-san look cute together? She whispered. Can we play matchmaker on the way to find Roshi-san? To be honest, Imo Udo, I could care less about my own love life, let alone the love lives of others. If you wish to perform the act of matchmaking Fire Dragon in the Heartphilia, then by all means. Knock yourself out. He gestured to the arguing fairy tale mages and Wendy giggled even more, her excitement bubbling to the surface. Yay, she cheered. Natsu turned away from Lucy and looked back at the blue-eyed blonde. So what's the plan, bastard? First off, my parents were married, ergo. Not a bastard. He corrected the son of Igneel. Secondly, the plan is to use our noses. I'm sure that since you've met Imo Udo, you now have unlocked the latent ability to sniff out other Dragonslayers when they're within range, correct? Yeah, and since I've hung around him for the 3 months prior to the war with Phantom Lord, I know his scent. We gonna sniff Roshi-sensei out? In layman's terms, yes. The blonde Dragonslayer replied. And since it was said by Sky Dragon that Wind Dragon and Ice Dragon came along with her, then it may be possible to run across them along the way. With you, Imo Udo and myself. 3 noses of Dragonslayers will increase our probability of finding them. 3-fold, Wendy declared, holding up 3 fingers with a cheeky grin. So, we're gonna find the other Dragonslayers? Lucy asked. Basically, the son of 2 wizard saints shrugged. Natsu and Wendy then worked in tandem with the older Dragonslayer and Lucy watched in awe as the 3 merely took a few forceful sniffs of the air before turning north. That way, they said simultaneously. That was unnaturally quick, Lucy said. Don't underestimate a Dragonslayer's nose. Natsu grinned as he patted the brown-eyed girl on the head. He then grabbed her by the hand and pulled her along as they all broke out into a run. However, as they were running, Lucy turned and looked past the Fire Dragonslayer to focus on Wendy's surrogate brother. She watched as the 12-year-old playfully rode on his shoulders and pulled at his face. His full-view face. Now that I think about it, this is the first time we've seen his full face. She thought. She tilted her head in confusion and Naruto felt her eyes on him, his blue orbs shifting and catching her own gaze. What do you want, Heartphilia? He asked. Nothing, she unintentionally shouted, causing the 3 Dragonslayers to wince from the volume. Enhanced hearing sucked sometimes. It's just the first time I'm seeing your whole face and I'm just kinda surprised that you have whiskers. The son of Agnologia sweat dropped before shaking his head. I'm regretting this already. Insert music. Birth, Extalia, Edalus. The pair of Exceed groaned as their eyes adjusted to the bright light. Someone turn off the sun, Happy mumbled as he rolled to the side to avoid the assault on his retinas. However, the act of being awoken served to keep him awake and so the blue-furred feline begrudgingly stretched out his muscles before climbing to his feet. His black eyes widened when he caught sight of the white-furred Fekago, Charles. He quickly ran over to his fellow Exceed and shook her lightly. Her face twisted into an expression of annoyance before she began to wake up. What happened? Happy. Charlie's eyes widened abruptly as she quickly sat up. She looked around frantically, pushing Happy off of the bed they had been sleeping on, the blue cat falling face first onto the floor. In less confusing circumstances, Charles would have actually cared about the other talking cat's well-being while also laughing at his pain, but currently she was quite fixated on the fact that she was sitting atop a bed. Wait a minute. A bed? Charles observed the room, taking note of its rather luxurious furnishings. It was one of those rooms that she had seen in the picture books Wendy used to read as a child. A younger child. And everything was a rather soft shade of pink. From the curtains and the doors to the pillows and the small chair near the pair of French doors that led to the balcony to her left, it was all pink. I despise pink, she muttered before her fellow exceed hopped back atop the bed and bounced atop it excitedly. Happy smiled brightly at seeing how the object of his affections was well. Charles, you're okay. She ignored his cries of happiness before her harsh brown eyes met his obsidian orbs. Where are we? Where's Wendy? I don't know the answer to either of those questions. Happy stopped bouncing and frowned. Come to think of it, Natsu and Lucy aren't here either. Usually I'd be with them, but I honestly have no clue what happened. Besides, Charles, I thought you had left with Wendy and the Fujin when I last saw you. How did you end up here with me? Well, it was most likely coincidence since I had went with Wendy to Magnolia to get some medical supplies for one of our newfound nakama. After that, I think I saw something in the sky. Everything's a blur after that actually. It was then that the door to the room was opened. Happy, in a surprising show of bravery, took to standing in front of his white-furred companion so as to protect her. Oh, good NYA. I see you two have finally awakened NYA. The intruder was a black exceed who was very tall in comparison to Happy and Charles. He bore a large, black, rectangular head with the portion below his nose being white. His eyes were perfectly round and had small white eyebrows that look a somewhat triangular shape as well as pink ears and 2 whiskers on each side of his face. His tail was thin and rectangular. His clothing consisted of a black jacket with 3 golden buttons that was worn over a light-colored turtleneck, along with a dark yellow pair of pants and small brown boots that reached to his ankles. Who are you? Charles asked, her mistrust being blatantly shown towards this unknown exceed. I am Nadi, the Minister of State of the Kingdom of Extalia Nya. Nadi said. Charles and Happy suddenly took note of the fact that as he was speaking, Nadi's paw was incessantly waving up and down. I was instructed to come and check on you by Her Majesty, the Queen of Extalia, Shagid-sama. Seeing as you are now awake, I must follow my other instructions to bring to Her Majesty's chambers Nya. Nadi then opened the door further and motioned for the younger exceed to follow him. Despite his excessively friendly demeanor, Happy and Charles knew better than to let their guards down, so they tentatively hopped off of the bed and proceeded to exit the room, following after their paw-waving escort. The hallways were just what one would expect to find within the confines of a castle or palace. Extravagant artworks and colorful flora decorated them, and after every few minutes they would walk through a junction area which would lead to a different part of the castle. The 3 exceed marched along through the halls, but being 2 newcomers to the world of their species, they asked the questions regarding what they were, where they were, why were they called exceed, and what was Extalia, being the rapid-fire questions. Nadi was more than happy to oblige, telling them all about the culture and what portions of the history of Edalis and Extalia that he knew of. Happy was entranced by the tales, but Charles was not so childish as to be taken away by the flowery words and exaggerated movements that came with Nadi's storytelling. The older exceed looked to be hiding something, and for some reason, whenever he spoke of the queen, he would glance at her. He obviously tried to make it as discreet as possible, but with such large eyes it was nearly impossible not to notice them. So, what exactly does the Minister of State do here? Do you control how much fish is distributed? Can I have all of it? Happy's eyes sparkled with joy at the thought of receiving a mountain of fish. Charles' sweat dropped, placing her face in her paws as she resisted the urge to slap Happy for his fish-related stupidity. Well, if we did have fishes as a resource, then yes, I would manage its distribution Nya. Nadi laughed, patting Happy on his head. However, seeing as how that is not the case, my main function is to help with the passing of laws as well as ensuring the financial and economical stability of the kingdom. Shagit-sama does most of that, but as her right hand, I aid in the processes. I also hold a bit of sway when it comes to the military, since I am the leader of the Exceed Council that provides advice for Shagit-sama when she needs to make some very tough decisions Nya. As Nadi continued his explanation on the details of his job of being Minister of State, Charles began to fidget as she felt the need to sat her curiosity. Her anxiety began to get the better of her, and finally, "What do you want with us?" Charles interrupted loudly. Nadi and Happy jumped at her exclamation. The Minister of State looked at her in confusion. "I beg your pardon Nya?" the taller exceed asked. "We are 2 unknowns here in Edalis," Charles continued, her earlier level of mistrust being highlighted once more. "What business would the Queen of the Exceed want with us? Why do you keep looking at me every time you speak of Shagit? That is the reason for this meeting. Pardon my manners, but I'm afraid I forgot to ask your names after introducing myself." Nadi laughed sheepishly as he waved his paw slower and scratched the back of his lengthy neck in embarrassment. Charles. Happy. Charles and Happy, splendid names for splendid members of the Exceed race NYA, Nadi stated. Happy laughed lightly at the taller Exceed's exuberance only for him and Charles to come to a halt behind Nadi. They tilted their bodies to look beyond him before gazing in awe at the single marble statue that stood in front of the giant white doors. The statue was made in the image of a regal feline figure that Happy and Charles could only assume was Queen Shaggot. Pretty. Happy muttered. Indeed, my young friend NYA. Nadi nodded in agreement as they walked past the statue. Shaggot-sama is a gem, and an Exceed whose beauty is unparalleled NYA. I've seen many a pretty female amongst our species before and during my time as the Minister of State, but none of them can hold a candle to that of Shaggot-sama's. I understand, Happy proclaimed. That's what I think of Charles Chan. Oh, Nadi raised an eyebrow as he gave a sly grin to the white-furred female. Charles blushed in embarrassment before scowling. You don't even know me. You like fish. No, I don't. You're a cat, so you must like fish. Don't thrust stereotypes onto me, you fish-loving idiot. I ought to be in love. Nadi chuckled as he waved his paw at a faster pace, grinning with pride at Happy. Happy grinned back, but as Charles turned to her blue-furred companion to smack him upside the head, she felt an odd sensation in her arm. Glancing down, her eyes widened in shock as she caught sight of the fact that her paw was now beginning to mimic the motions of Nadi's. She looked over to Happy and saw that he too was mimicking the action. By the dragons, what just? How what? Happy and Nadi asked in unison, their paws waving in sync. It's making me do it for some reason. Charlie's outrage was quite comical as she smashed her waving paw down on Happy's head like a jackhammer. Ooh. The fairy tale member groaned as he clutched the large bump that formed on his noggin. Nadi continued to laugh at the amusingly violent scene before he split them apart. He gripped Happy by his neckerchief and Charles by the collar of her dress before dragging them along. Alright, that's enough amusement for one day. We can't keep Shaggot-sama waiting, after all. She is the queen. Nadi proclaimed as he pumped his fist rapidly into the air. He then dragged the two around the statue of the Queen of the Exceed before pushing open the massive white doors to reveal the throne room which lay on the other side. Insert music. RWBY Volume 2 Welcome to Beacon. The throne room was a massive room of white and decorated with large purple and gold banners hanging from the arches that helped support the ceiling of the castle. There were 3 rows containing 3 banners, giving a total of 9 banners decorating the throne room. Each of the banners bore the symbol of Extalia, which was a large cat head in gold with 3 small triangles underneath it arranged in an inverted arch. Near the front of the room were a few steps that led to 9 different thrones arranged in a semicircle. 8 of the thrones were all smaller and less elegant in appearance than the one which sat at the farthest end of the room in the center of the semicircle, and was built to be noticeably taller and grander looking at the others. And for good reason too, as that particular throne was revealed to be the one where Queen Shaggot, ruler of the Exceed race, sat. 6 of the thrones were occupied by rather elderly-looking Exceed wearing elegant red robes, their beady black eyes staring directly at the 2 younger Exceed that Nadi brought into the chambers. Nadi left Charles and Happy in the center of the room as he walked forwards and took his place on throne that was located to the right of Shaggot. On her left, Happy and Charles took note of the yellow-furred feline. Their eyes widened. Doesn't that look like? Happy started, only for Charles to nod in agreement. I think it does. The Exceed they had taken note of was disturbingly identical to that of the Blue Pegasus member, Uchiha. He had the same facial features as Uchiha too. He also had a distinctively large head, with orange hair arranged in a wavy style with a fringe hanging on his forehead. He wore a red hat with a cat symbol on it. His clothing was more akin to that of a military outfit, wearing a royal blue army coat with a brown belt. He also wore a 2-paneled apron, with the Extalia symbol imprinted on it, dark green pants and brown boots. A sheathed sword lay strapped to his right hip. You're late, Nadi. He even sounds like Uchiha, Happy and Charles exclaimed in their minds. My apologies, Captain Uchiha. Charles and Happy could only become bug-eyed and slack-jawed. Even their names were similar. It was basically like watching a cat version of Uchiha sitting in front of them. I was very much caught up with answering the questions these two had on our way over here. Nadi laughed in embarrassment. Apologize to Kami-sama for your delay. Uchiha huffed. To keep Kami-sama waiting is a sin, isn't that right, Kami-sama? Nadi turned to Shaggot, but the white-furred feline merely waved her paw to say it was no trouble before turning back to the head of her military forces. Uchiha-kun, it is quite alright. Also, I've told you countless times that Kami-sama is a title that I don't like being referred to as. But, you are Kami-sama. The 9 made you as their proxy before they vanished, and due to them being our gods, you are therefore a deity by relation. Shaggot sighed, rubbing her temples. The fact that Uchiha's logic was rather sound didn't help the fact that she wanted to not be referred to as a goddess. She then proceeded to turn away from her military commander and focused on the two Exceed before her, granting them a warm smile. Forgive our earlier squabble. As you may have been informed earlier by Naughty-kun, I am Queen Shagat, ruler of the Exceed. I'm Happy, and this is Charles-chan. Happy pumped his paw enthusiastically as he introduced themselves. Shagat, Nichia and the other council members all turned to Naughty with a sweat drop. He's corrupted the poor kitten. They thought as they watched Naughty perform the same waving of his paw. They turned back to the younger Exceed as Charles slapped down Happy's paw to make him stop. Charles. So that is the name you chose to go by. Shagat giggled. I must say, it is a much better name than anything I would have gone with. Charlie's eyes blazed with annoyance. That's it, I've had enough of this cryptic shit. Now you listen here, kitten. A blue-furred council member rose from his throne. Despite who you are not given the liberty to speak with such a tone towards our queen. The other council members were beginning to voice similar opinions, but they were immediately silenced by Charles releasing a pulse of magic that accompanied her spiking rage. The wings of her era magic sprung forth from her back and she rose into the air. She pointed a claw at all of the older Exceed before her. All of you have given me this look as if you already know me. You don't know me, and that's a fact because Happy and we have only just come to Edelus as we have spent our entire lives in Earthland. She kept rising into the air until she was staring Shagat in the eye. Naughty kept giving me glances every time he spoke about you, Shagat-sama, and now all of you are giving me these same looks. I don't understand, and I want to understand. Do you know what I am? Do you know who I am? Charles. Happy gave a worried glance at the object of his affections. The truth is, Charles-chan, I don't know who you are. Shagat had a frown on her face as she looked at the airborne Exceed before a sad smile came on her face. But I would have liked to. After all, I did give birth to your egg. Silence reigned supreme in the throne room. Charles and Happy watched the queen with looks of disbelief. Charles. Happy uttered. My egg? But giving birth to my egg means that you're my. Charles looked between herself and Shagat. You can't be. How could you be my? This is impossible. There are rarely any white-furred Exceed within my kingdom, Charles, let alone bearing my eyes. Shagat pointed at the brown orbs that were very much identical in shade to that of Charlie's. Plus, I can sense your magic energy. Same feel as my own, which means that my assumption as to whether or not you would have inherited my gift from the 9 is positive. You mean the visions? Precognitive abilities that are apparently a bloodline trait. Shagat confirmed. You have my appearance and my abilities, so you are indeed my flesh and blood. Charles, you are the crown princess of the Exceed, and my daughter. Charlie's wings disappeared in a flash of sky blue light and she fell from her perch in the air. Happy acted quickly and caught her, but Charles was in a state of shock. All the information she was just given, while little in terms of volume, was too much for her process. Charles blinked rapidly as she began to return to the realm of cognitive thought and to try and stop the tears of emotion that began to fall. Charles-chan, are you okay? He exclaimed. I'm fine. She assured Happy she was fine as she climbed back to her feet. Once she was able to stand, she looked at the queen of the Exceed. The female that suddenly had the audacity to call herself her mother with such confidence, and her paws clenched into tight fists. For over 7 years, I wanted to know exactly what I was. To know exactly who I was. She muttered before raising her fists in a threatening manner before forcefully unfurling them to reveal her claws springing forth. Oh dear. Naughty's eyes widened at the implication of a threat. You. Explain. Now. She gave off a tea made the 8 members of the Exceed Council shudder. A familiar cold chill that they only felt around their monarch when she was in an intolerable mood beginning to race down their spines. She's definitely her mother's child, they thought. Shagat nodded before turning to Happy. You all deserve to know. After all, it was on my orders that you were both sent to Earthland in the first place. With those words, Shagat had Charlie's and Happy's undivided attention. Sitcha, Edelus the small group had to quickly come to a halt as the sound of footsteps meeting the ground met their ears. The 3 Dragonslayers and Lucy all watched as a small faction of armored men and women moved in their direction, each one brandishing weapons. Some held swords, and some held lances and spears. The group then came to a stop as they looked at the small group of Earthland natives. There you are, you criminals, the lead knight spoke with authority in her voice. Imo Udo. Naruto kept his eyes on the woman and Wendy laughed nervously. Well, I'm assuming you found us from seeing that tornado earlier. Wendy stated as she looked up at the elder Dragonslayer, watching him nod in confirmation. Yes, well, when I had found Natsu-san and Lucy-san, they were running from these soldiers. Along the way, they had collected magic weapons and gave one to me. Natsu-san got some sort of fire sword, and I had gotten a cylindrical capsule of some sort which actually contained magic-induced winds. So the tornado was kind of my fault. We managed to escape them and we were sent away from this particular squadron of knights when I opened the tornado capsule. Naruto sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I know of Fairy Tail's reputation, But really, Fire Dragon, can you not adhere to your guild's policies for wanton destruction and mayhem for once in your life? It wasn't my fault, Natsu snapped. If anything, it's Wendy's for using the giant twister. You used a fire sword and instigated the fight, Natsu-san. Do not blame me for your nature of wanting to make every single meeting against an unknown into a battle, Wendy replied hotly. Silence. The Aeolus Knight ordered. By the authority vested in me by His Majesty, King Faust, 6th King of the Kingdom of Aeolus, I am placing you 3 under arrest for the crimes of escaping custody and the words died in her throat as Wendy and Natsu turned to them, their pupils becoming vertical slits as they bared their sharpened canines. Stay out of this, they growled. Their fists lashed out, Natsu striking her in the face and Wendy's digging into her belly. Her eyes rolled up into her head before she stumbled backwards and fell unconscious before the rest of her troops. Captain. The other soldiers' eyes widened at the attack on their commanding officer before they glared at the 2 Dragonslayers. Get them. Insert music. Shingeki no Kyojin DOA. The soldiers released their loud battle cry and charged across the roads of Shicha. One soldier drew his blade and went to strike Natsu, but the pink-haired Dragonslayer moved to block the attack. He gripped the man by his wrist and twisted the joint harshly, making the soldier yelp in pain as the blade clattered to the ground. Wendy then lashed out with a strong knee, denting the metal that protected his groin area and sent the man into a silent scream. The whites of his eyes were shown as they rolled up into his head and he passed out from the pain. The Dragonslayers of Fire and Sky growled at the other Knights of Aeolus before they stamped their feet down and pushed off. The earth cracked from the force and they were blurs of motion to the Knights. Wendy slammed her palm against the side of one Knight's face before turning it into a tight grip to slam the young woman into the ground. She kept her grip active so as to spin around and fling the female Knight at her fellow Knights. A resounding clang echoed throughout the small town and the eyes of the citizens watched as their armored protectors were about to be beaten into the ground. Natsu caught the fist of one Knight before crashing his own against the man's face, breaking his nose with a sickening crack. The Knight stumbled backwards, gripping the damaged body part, blood spilling out from between his fingers to decorate the dusty ground before the sound of a chain clinking met his ears. His eyes widened as Lucy used the chain of her kusarigama, wrapping it around her opponent's wrists. With a harsh tug, she sent the soldier stumbling forwards before Lucy ran up to deliver a strong kick to his midsection. He shot through the air and slammed into 2 of his fellow soldiers and had them falling to the ground in a small heap. 3 of the Knights then raised their bows and notched their arrows, but Lucy quickly hopped over to a dropped shield and slammed her boot down onto it, causing it to flip into the air before she caught the defensive weapon and used it for its main purpose of protecting its user. The arrows released audible clangs as they ricocheted off of the dense steel surface. Here's steel in your face. The former billionaire heiress hurled the kite shield like a frisbee, and the spinning projectile slammed into the body of one of the bowmen and sent him to the ground, gasping for breath as the wind was driven from his lungs. Halt! Naruto's voice echoed across the battlefield. All fighting suddenly came to a halt and the Knights of Aeolus all had their eyes wide in shock when they saw the son of Agnologia standing atop their unconscious captain. His right boot was placed firmly atop her armor-plated chest, and the sword that was once sheathed by her side had been taken from her. Its tip was now aimed at her throat. I do not care for your captain's life, but I am aware of the level of compassion that a subordinate can show for their superior. If you do show that level of compassion and loyalty to her, then drop your weapons and answer my questions, and she will live. You dirty little bastard. Don't try to play like you're a big man, boy. One of the bowmen growled out. You're bluffing, and… The bowman's words were cut off as Naruto shifted the blade away from the knight captain's throat and, without hesitation, drove the blade through her arm. Her eyes snapped open and a loud shriek of pain echoed through the air as tendon and blood vessels were sliced through. Taiko! The knights exclaimed, but they dared not move as the blue-eyed man roughly wrenched the now blood-stained blade free and held it to the wailing captain's throat once more. That was just to make you shut up. The next strike will be through her throat, I promise you that. Naruto stated as he raised his boot from her chest and stamped it down on the arm that had been impaled, earning a louder cry of pain for his efforts. Drop your weapons and get on your knees. You stand before the children of dragons, so act like it. The order was obeyed and all the knights dropped their respective weapons, and while reluctant to adhere to the second order, a twitch of the hand which held their commanding officer's blade made them quick to follow it as well. Ridiculed and humiliated, the blonde Dragonslayer now had his captives vulnerable and so he proceeded to question them. We're in Aeolus. It was more of a statement than a question. What is the fastest route to reach to the capital city?
Oi, shouldn't we be asking where Roshi-sensei is? If they saw him, Natsu asked.
We have his scent. The son of Agnologia replied. We could find him whenever we wished, but as for the 9, if they have truly been taken by force then it is most likely that the king has them. We will most probably find the 9 there. One of the swordsmen pointed in a northeasterly direction. You continue heading straight north from this town. It's a direct path to the kingdom capital. How long will that take on foot? I'd say about 5 days, maybe a week, the spearman replied. We don't have days, Wendy muttered. What's a faster method of transportation? There are vehicles, but EV that is of that level is found within the kingdom capital. Every other town or village outside the capital are rather rural in comparison. The spearman looked at Naruto once more with a look of realization. You're planning to assassinate the king, aren't you? The other knights looked at the recently formed criminals of their land, harsh glares directed at them. No, of course not, Lucy exclaimed, raising her arms in an X in front of her body. We have no business with your king, you idiots. Natsu crossed his arms in front of his chest. We're just trying to find some of our nakama. Fire Dragon is correct. Naruto stabbed the wounded captain's sword into the ground before he removed his foot off of her fallen form's stab wound. He roughly picked her up and tossed her in the direction of her subordinates. Here, take it. Taiko. 2 of the knights quickly moved to catch her, falling back onto their rears from the force of Naruto's throw. Now then, I believe it is time we take our leave, Naruto stated. Wendy, Natsu and Lucy nodded in agreement. However, before they could even take a single step, a loud and terrifying roar echoed throughout the air of the parallel world. All heads turned skyward in confusion and surprise. High above their heads, a small dot came into view. The dot quickly began to increase in size as it moved through the skies at a rapid pace, zeroing on their location. What is that? Lucy muttered. Insert music, AZPV. The dot suddenly began to take shape and was shown to be in the form of a rather odd-looking creature. The creature was covered in smooth, dark fur. Its head was very flat, pointed and angular. Large, round, beady black eyes held bloodlust within them. Its mouth was agape as it unleashed its terrifying roar once more, displaying its sharp teeth which appeared to be fused to its maw. Protruding from the creature's head were a pair of very large, feathery, yet smooth, black horns. Just above its maw, the beast bore 3 slitted nostrils on either side of its angular head. In comparison to its body, the beast's jet black wings were rather relative, being very smooth and wavy, with white, spot-like patterns running neatly through the folds of each wing. The black paws, which were rather small in comparison to its giant body, had 5 talons on each front claw and 4 on each back. Lastly, it possessed a long, whip-like tail, with the end of said tail resembling a broken eggshell. The beast made a completely vertical descent towards ground zero, but just before it could crash down, it spread out its wings and pulled up. A great gust of wind created a cloud of dust and the large beast launched itself towards the group of 4. However, before the creature could make any sort of attempt to bite them with its fangs or rip them apart with its claws, Naruto stepped forward and took a solid stance. Time seemed to slow down for the blonde Dragonslayer as he ducked underneath the charge. He spun on his heel to build up momentum before lashing out with a devastating rising kick to the monster's chin. Its lower jaw met its upper one with a resounding clack, its head snapping upward from the force. The son of 2 wizard saints leapt after his bestial opponent before grabbing one its horns and with a small amount of effort, snapped the sharp piece of bone off of its creature's head. The beast roared in agony, but that agony died away just as quickly as it came when Naruto went with the momentum of his action to go into a backflip. With his altitude now above that of the dark-furred beasts, he reared back his arm and unleashed the broken horn in his grasp upon the beast. The horn slammed into the creature's skull, nailing it directly between the eyes. A powerful shockwave raced out from the point of impact and a loud crack echoed across the area to signify Naruto's attack breaking the skull of the behemoth. The momentum of the attack carried through to the creature's body, sending it rocketing to the ground where its impact was so terrific that it generated the formation of a crater. With its brain now heavily damaged, the winged behemoth's eyes lost the light of bloodlust as it lay still on the ground, dead. Silence reigned supreme for a moment as all eyes looked at the citizen of Earthland as he landed atop the corpse. Even without magic he's still so strong. Natsu interrupted Lucy before she should finish her sentence. Oni-san is the best there is, Wendy stated with pride in her brown eyes. To take down a legion in such a swift manner. You're no ordinary man it seems. A stern female voice met their ears. A stern female voice that all 4 of the natives of Earthland were all too well acquainted with. Why? Why? Lucy asked rhetorically. You have got to be kidding me. Natsu deadpanned. Wendy remained silent, she was so surprised. I am Urza Nightwalker, Royal Army Captain of the 2nd Magic War Division. Urza Nightwalker was a well-endowed female with long, flowing, wavy scarlet hair with an elegant, loosely tied knot at the back. Grasped firmly in her right hand was a long spear, the head of which split off into 4 jagged ends which curved inwards, resembling jaws. So, this is how she would have looked if she could kill without mercy. Naruto muttered as he took note of the look in Nightwalker's eyes. Cold and unforgiving, those were the brown eyes that would have appeared on his biological sister had she learned to kill without mercy. And the way she carried her spear showed she was experienced with the polearm and no doubt took many a life with it. I can't say I don't approve of the look in her eyes, but still. Naruto's eyebrow twitched erratically as he looked at Nightwalker from the neck down. Does she have to dress just as provocatively? Indeed, Nightwalker's outfit was just as provocative as the armors of his sisters, as it was comprised of a revealing, halter-type armor breastplate top that left much of her cleavage and stomach exposed, with light armored gauntlets and greaves on her forearms and forelegs, respectively, as well as her thighs. She also wore a dark bikini bottom with a piece of cloth obscuring her hips. Her outfit was completed with a dark scarf around her neck. Naruto sighed. I guess some things have to remain constant in a person, but why does it have to be her manner of dressing herself? This one is an army captain. You'd think she would wear some actual armor. Nightwalker Taiko. One of the knights knelt before the red-haired captain. The two girls and the pink-haired boy are criminals charged with property destruction, but the blonde man, he is to be charged with assaulting a captain of the royal guard. Nightwalker glanced behind her and took note of the bleeding wound of the captain Naruto had stabbed. Nightwalker Taiko, we would try to apprehend him, but seeing what he has done to your legion, I don't believe we are capable of the task as of this moment. Another knight spoke. I do not tolerate excuses, soldier. Nightwalker stated coldly, causing the other knights to stiffen in fear, their heads falling in shame shortly after. However, to take down a legion in 2 blows is indeed a feat of strength that you all would not be capable of handling, even with your magic weapons. You are spared punishment this day, but I do not want this to happen again, understood? Yes, Nightwalker Taiko, they exclaimed, saluting to the red-haired spearwoman. Good. Now take your captain and retreat back to the quarters here in Shippuden town, while I handle these criminals. Understood. The small squadron immediately retreated. Insert music. Fate, Stay Night UBW Blazing Ashes 2. Nightwalker spun her spear in her hands before holding it in a battle-ready position. Her brown eyes analyzed the opponents, taking into account every single characteristic that was within her field of vision. She then zeroed in on Lucy, and the blonde celestial spirit mage's eyes widened as Nightwalker didn't spare a moment. Her legs tensed before she pushed off, a small cloud of dent before she appeared in front of Lucy. Fast, the Kusarigama wielder thought with wide eyes. Lucy. Lucy-san. Natsu and Wendy's cries of alarm were drowned out by the battle cry from the citizen of Edalis. HYAH. Nightwalker stabbed at Lucy's head, but Lucy quickly bent over backwards. Her flexibility having reached new heights when she trained with Amiyuri and Kisame, she bent back so far that she managed to plant her hands down on the ground before kicking off. Nightwalker stepped back to avoid the toes of Lucy's boots from impacting with her chin. As Lucy recovered, the former Heartfilia heir swung her Kusarigama's chain, aiming to strike with the weighted end of it. Nightwalker ducked under the swing and then spun on her feet to crash the butt of her spear into Lucy's stomach. However, the celestial spirit mage reacted much quicker than the redhead anticipated as she sucked in her stomach while sidestepping the strike. Lucy then swung her chain and the weapon wound around the pole arm twice to give Lucy a firm grasp on Nightwalker's weapon. Lucy then pulled and Nightwalker stumbled forward while Lucy stepped towards the army captain of Edalis. With the Edalesian Urza now in her range, Lucy's grip tightened on the sickle handle of her Kusarigama before she swung down to deliver a strike to the right shoulder which, if it hit correctly, would prevent her from raising her arm and effectively wielding her spear. And since she appeared right-handed, Lucy knew this attack would practically win her the fight. However, Nightwalker wasn't an army captain for nothing. As she was in the midst of stumbling, she allowed gravity to take her, offering no resistance as she fell forwards. The maneuver allowed the red-haired spearwoman to shift her body and avoid the sickle and deliver a powerful elbow strike to Lucy's stomach. The blonde gritted her teeth and powered through the pain to raise her knee and strike against Nightwalker's own stomach. Lucy's attempt at extreme close-quarters combat gave Nightwalker the opening she needed, however, as she gripped her spear tighter and used her powerful arms to swing it in an arc. With Lucy's chain still wrapped securely around its shaft, and part of said chain being in Lucy's own grasp, the fairy tale mage was hurled through the air. The Kusarigama's chain became slack after the throw, falling to the ground after it unwound itself from the shaft, but Natsu was on the move and quickly scooped up the Kusarigama. Lucy. He hurled the chain with a surprising amount of accuracy at Lucy as she arched through the air. Got it. She latched onto the weapon and the pink-haired Dragonslayer roared as he skidded across the ground to come a halt while also swinging his fellow fairy tale mage around. Lucy unleashed a battle cry as she stretched out her leg when she got in line with Nightwalker. Nightwalker's eyes widened and she was quick to raise her spear shaft to block, but the force behind Lucy's strong kick was enough to send her skidding backwards by a significant amount. The royal army captain dug her spear into the ground, tearing a small gash in the earth until she came to a stop. She quickly withdrew her weapon from the earth, a burst of magic energy now cloaking its lengthy form. Sylpharian, in a burst of golden light, the spear changed its appearance, now bearing a triangular, arrowhead-like spearhead, with golden and red stripes adorned with a white circle encompassed by the thick golden armor layer. The triangular head of the spear embodies a silver outline, whilst the inner area sports a much darker color. Nightwalker dug her boots into the ground before pushing off, the ground rupturing slightly from the force of her charge. All eyes widened at the sudden burst and speed, but the daughter of Grandine was quick to act as she utilized her own high levels of speed to meet the spearwoman head-on. Wendy reared back her leg and swung it in the form of a deadly roundhouse. Limb and polearm collided with a resounding clang, and a powerful shockwave raced out from the point of impact. To keep up with the Sylpharian form of my 10 commandments, you have potential. Oni-san says the same thing, but your words are nothing to me. The daughter of Grandine growled before rotating her body to dig her heel into Nightwalker's temple. But Nightwalker quickly leaned her head back to dodge it. She shifted her spear to strike Wendy's calf and knocked the assaulting limb skyward before stepping forward and delivering a strong palm strike to the chest. Wendy raised her arms and caught Nightwalker by the wrist, but a strong kick to the stomach loosened her grip and sent her flying back before the young Dragonslayer could even think to attack. The Sky Dragonslayer landed deftly on her feet before ducking under the follow-up swing from the Edelysian's charge. Wendy performed a sweeping kick, but Nightwalker hopped over the strike before swinging her weapon down upon Wendy's skull. The blue-haired girl raised her arms in a X shape, blocking the strike. The force of the attack traveled through her body and forced her body to sink into the earth as it caved in beneath her feet. Impressive strength from a child, Nightwalker complimented. But it will not save you from death. The redhead spun the spear in her fingers before swinging it in an upward arc which Wendy avoided by going into a backhand sprain. However, Nightwalker took a strong step forward and jabbed her weapon at Wendy. The brown-eyed Dragonslayer, having just completed her acrobatic movement, did not expect the sudden strike and her eyes widened as the sharp steel of the 10 Commandments dug into her shoulder. Wendy, Natsu and Lucy cried out in alarm as they saw the young girl now bleeding from the wound. To her credit, Wendy was built of stronger stuff as she merely began gritting her teeth in pain as metal met bone. Your tale ends here, child. Nightwalker pulled back and moved to stab the blue-haired preteen in the heart. As Kurama-chan would say, fuck you. Wendy quickly aimed to take advantage of the close proximity to hit Nightwalker in the knee with a well-timed kick with her right foot, knocking her opponent off balance before swinging her leg upwards. This is why you should wear actual armor, Wendy declared before her foot planted itself firmly against Nightwalker's groin. The brown-eyed spearwoman's eyes widened as pain lanced through her body, only for it to be amplified as Wendy delivered a palm strike to the stomach. Nightwalker coughed up spittle as the wind was driven from her lungs before a strong right hook made her world spin when it connected with her jaw. However, years of experience on the battlefield and taking many a life did not leave the woman to be fragile. She went with the momentum of her spin to swing her spear in an upward arc, the shaft crashing against the younger female's body. The 12-year-old released a small cry of pain as she was in the air, but her brown eyes widened when a shadow covered her form. Nightwalker had leapt to intercept the 12-year-old, her weapon raised high over her head. The spear glowed with magic energy once more and its form shifted for a second time. The spear's head changed, possessing a triangular-shaped blade with two curvy, yellow lines located at the center. The red edges of the spear started out wavy, but straightened up around the middle section of the spearhead to form a sharp point. The red triangular-shaped blade was being supported by an inverted diamond-like shape, which surrounded a light, silver color and a much darker shade at the center. Explosion. The blade glowed with magic energy and the redhead swung her weapon down upon the blue-haired preteen. She's using magic, Naruto muttered, his eyes widening along with those of the fairy tale mages as they watched the sword descend upon the Sky Dragonslayer. The spear's glowing form suddenly made impact with Wendy and a powerful burst of light and fire erupted forth from the tip of the spearhead, cloaking Wendy's form in its painful embrace. Indy's scream of pain echoed through the air only to be drowned out by the shockwave-inducing explosion that Nightwalker had created with her spear. The blue-haired girl's small frame rocketed out from the cloud of smoke and fire, arching through the air only to be quickly caught by Naruto as he leapt off of Nightwalker's dead legion. The blonde landed on the ground in a crouched position and looked over his surrogate little sister. Her clothes were burned heavily, having lost the entirety of her right sleeve, some parts of the right side and large holes now present on her skirt. Her skin, particularly her legs and right arm, were red from the intense heat of the explosion and some areas now bore the signs of second-degree burns. Her eyes clenched tightly in an effort to hold back the tears of pain. The fires from the explosion served to cauterize the area of her shoulder that Nightwalker had impaled. Wendy, Imo Udo. Naruto spoke softly, Oni-san, I'm sorry. No shush, it's okay. The son of Acnologia brushed aside the strands of hair that covered her face. It's okay, my little sky dragon. You did well. You really have improved greatly over these past few years that we've been apart. Wendy smiled weakly before she finally blacked out from the pain. Naruto held the preteen tightly to his chest before rising to his full height, murder in his eyes. Nightwalker smirked despite the killing intent being sent her way. However, as she prepared to do battle with the other 3 citizens of Earthland, a loud mechanical sound roared across the town. All eyes looked behind Nightwalker's position to see a cloud of smoke caused by the owner of the sound. The mechanical contraption zoomed straight towards Nightwalker at a rapid pace, forcing her to leap out of the way lest she become a mangled corpse. The 4-wheeled machine suddenly began to drift, kicking up a cloud of dust and dirt while also spewing fire from its exhaust pipes once they were facing in Nightwalker's direction. With the wall of flame now created, the mechanical 4-wheeler rushed towards the 3 Dragonslayers and Lucy. "Get in," a female voice in the passenger seat commanded. A myriad of thoughts went through Lucy, Natsu and Naruto's heads. With an injured Wendy without her magically driven healing factor to fix her up, Naruto scowled as he followed the command. He gripped the vehicle's side and hopped into the seat nearest to him. Natsu grabbed Lucy and they leapt into the backseat as well. "Drive, drive," the female exclaimed. "On it," the male voice of the driver responded. "You're not getting away," Nightwalker roared as she converted her spear to Sylpharian. "That's what you think." The driver of the vehicle laughed before he pushed a button on the dashboard. The engine roared louder and suddenly another burst of fire erupted forth from the exhaust pipes and cloaked its wheels. The sound of the tires screeching echoed throughout the town before the tongue of red-yellow fires flowed out behind the vehicle as it took on a burst of speed. The captain of the Aeolus army quickly leapt high into the air over the conflagration, and as Lucy turned back, she caught sight of the annoyed look on the redhead's face as she was forced to watch in annoyance as the vehicle was now a quickly vanishing speck in the distance and vice versa. Lucy sighed in relief, placing a hand on her chest as she felt the pounding of her rapidly beating heart. "That was close. I never knew you would be so adamant to jump into a vehicle, Natsu. You must have been cured of your—" The blonde celestial spirit mage sweat dropped as she looked at the rosette and saw him curled up in a ball, obviously not cured of his motion sickness. Her sweat drop only increased in size when she caught sight of Naruto. While it wasn't as exaggerated as Natsu's symptoms, and even if he was a Dragonslayer himself, to see the most powerful mage she had ever come across, who could instill fear in her heart from just a simply look, sweating and nauseous as he fought to keep down his vomit, was not something she expected to see. "Not a word," he grunted as he kept Wendy stable along the bumpy road. Lucy nodded slowly. Even without magic, the Ogono Fujin had shown himself to be just as capable in battle without his magic augmenting his already impressive strength. The brown-eyed mage then looked outside the window of the magic 4-wheeler. The former heir of the Heartfilia family marveled at the massive expanse of rocky terrain that they drove across, but was much more impressed by the multitude of floating islands and what appeared to be completely separate planets and celestial bodies that decorated the skies. It looked a lot more impressive with the light of the sun as it had just finished setting, and the otherworldly glow of the stars and surrounding celestial bodies served as a light source for those that lay beneath them. "We really are a long way from home," she thought. Insert music. RWBYI burn, Lewin. Aeolus Roshi downed another shot of tequila. Though his affinity to lava gave him a rather neat ability to resist the burning sensation of the alcohol as it went down his throat. Gajeel was busy downing his own bottle of rum while Juvia served to only have water, which made sense since she drew strength from the clear-colored liquid. "Another shot for me, barkeep," Roshi hollered. The well-dressed man nodded as he refilled the lava Dragonslayer's glass before moving on to other customers. Roshi snatched his shot up and downed the substance that some would call liquid fire. "I gotta say, Aeolus really has some good liquor."
"So, this parallel world stuff is all true it seems," Gajeel said as he swished the clear liquor around the similarly colored bottle. "You sure we're not just really drunk right now, and this is all a dream?"
"Your dreams are extremely vivid then, Gajeel-kun." Roshi laughed as he snatched a bottle of whiskey and soda from a passing waitress, patting her lightly on the ass. She turned to reprimand the red-haired man, but she merely let him off with a glare after he slipped some jewels down her apron pocket in return for her services. "Smooth," the Iron Dragonslayer commented. "It's a gift." The son of Volcanus shrugged. "How's that water treating you, Juvia-chan? You sure you don't want anything stronger than that?" "Yes, Roshi-san," Juvia replied. Livia Okawa-san always told Juvia that Juvia should not take liquor since it dehydrates the body. Being the water Dragonslayer, that would not be a good thing for me, especially due to my ability to turn my body into water at will. "You're a good girl, Juvia-chan." Roshi patted the blue-haired woman on her head and she blushed lightly at the compliment, hiding her face by looking down at her glass of water. "Juvia thanks you, Roshi-san, but shouldn't we be looking for Natsu-san, Ursa-san and the others?" the daughter of Livia asked. "We are," the Iron Dragonslayer replied as he took another swig from his bottle. "Don't you know that most information comes from the bar? We've asked around and nobody knows about anybody that even remotely resembles our people, so with that in mind, I think we deserve a break. Ain't that right, Oji-san?" "Aye." Roshi clinked his whiskey with Gajeel's rum. "Jihei, the Iron Dragonslayer chuckled as he downed his bottle. Plus, barkeep said it was pole dancer night. I want to see if the women of this world stack up. Juvia bared her fangs at her fellow Dragonslayers. You're despicable. Says the one who wishes to rape her chosen mate. You have no right to judge, you little stalker. Gajeel shot back. Juvia huffed as she turned away with a blush of embarrassment on her face. That is an act of love towards Juvia's mate. And Juvia does not stalk. Juvia keeps eye on Grey-sama to prevent other love rivals from stealing away Grey-sama from Juvia. Juvia will not allow Grey-sama to be taken. Juvia's cries were then drowned out by the roars of the other bar patrons as the room grew darker and disco ball descended from the ceiling. Multicolored circled the darkness and a spotlight shone down on the stage that rose up out of the floor. The stage was like a smaller version of a catwalk, but there was single silver pole at the end of the catwalk. From behind the stage's curtain, the bartender adjusted his tie and gave a small bow to the patrons of his establishment. He tapped his microphone to make sure it was working before speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pole Dancer Night. Tonight we have your favorites, both male and female, performing for your viewing pleasure. Please remember to adhere to the rules of looking and not touching. Any breaking of these rules will result in an immediate end to the night's festivities and also a great deal of shaming towards the one who dares to break said rules. And we don't want that, do we? The bartender asked. Loud cries of approval towards his words were his response. Now, introducing our first dancer. She's a new girl, but she will definitely be a great addition. Please welcome the stunning redhead that is Scarlet Rose. The crowd applauded, released wolf whistles and cat calls as the curtain was parted slightly and all eyes widened in awe as a long leg that seemed to go on for miles appeared on the stage. The owner of the leg then revealed herself as she stepped out onto the stage dressed in a bejeweled bikini outfit that sparkled in the multicolored lights of the bar and served to highlight her very voluptuous form. Her long red hair was let loose to flow and her brown eyes met the patrons of the bar with a half-lidded look that served to enhance her sex appeal. Well damn, you kids really do grow up fast, Roshi commented. Juvia exclaimed, her face red as she watched the person on the stage. Well, I did say we'd get information on our friends at the bar, didn't I? Gajeel turned to the water Dragonslayer. Looks like we found Urza. Flashback. Fairy Tale Guildhouse, Magnolia Town, Fury 1 day ago. The skies had now lost their blue complexion and the white clouds had become dark and stormy. Rain fell down in copious amounts and soaked the streets. The majority of the stores had closed down due to the horrible weather. And while the few that could afford to remain open committed to the act, their customers had not. The torrential downpour was truly weather that spoke to people to remain inside their homes where it was safe and warm. And in spite of the rather melancholy weather, the Guild of Fairy Tale remained as loud, happy and boisterous as ever, for today was a day of celebration. Makarov had returned from his meeting with Lahar and the other 10 wizard saints earlier today, and it was on this day that they were able to celebrate the return of the strongest team from the mission in the Wood Sea, and also a certain son of Igniel regaining his hearing. Here's to a successful mission by our team, to their safe return and to Natsu getting his hearing back, Makarov announced with a mug of ale in the air. To Fairy Tale. To Fairy Tale. The men and women of the guild laughed and drank to their heart's content. Glass mugs clinked together in cheers and a few were watching in extreme concentration as an arm wrestling contest was going on between two of their guildmates. Their eyes met with blazing determination and lightning seemed to spark between them due to the intensity of their stares. Their muscles tensed, bulging visibly as they tried to overpower one another through sheer physical strength. Your strength is truly one that only the greatest of men can achieve, Natsu, Elfman declared. But can you surpass mine? Hell yeah I can, Natsu grinned, displaying his extremely sharp canines to the world. But I ain't no man. Elfman raised an eyebrow at his fire-using guildmate. I'm a fucking Dragonslayer. HRAH, Natsu roared and then pushed back against Elfman's resisting arm with enough force to break the table. A small dust cloud formed as Elfman was pushed back with such force that in order to prevent his arm from breaking, he spun with the momentum and flipped off of his chair, smashing down onto the floor with enough force to crack the wood. Elfman groaned, the world spinning for a moment. Ah, such manly strength. Lucy laughed at the exchange of might before she grabbed the pink-haired Dragonslayer by his wrist and held up into the air. Winner. Natsu Dragneel. The blonde exclaimed. The watching guildmates released roars of excitement while some were groaning in disappointment. Damn, and I thought we would have made a good few jewels too, Jet and Dwa frowned. As much as I hate the guy, Salamander is still not to be underestimated. Gajeel directed his red eyes at the males of Team Shadowgear. Now pay up. Yeah. Jihi. The Iron Dragonslayer grinned widely as he was now receiving the wads of cash from his guild members. Gajeel. Levy frowned. Don't steal money from my friends. They accepted the terms pipsqueak. Gajeel patted the blue-haired bookworm. You gotta learn the ways of the world, especially gambling. You're a pretty innocent kid if you've been staying in the guild for so many years and still haven't grasped the concept. Speaking of which, pay up shorty. The Iron Dragonslayer continued to pat the shorter girl on her head. She puffed her cheeks and glared at the black-haired man. A blush of embarrassment of her face due to how she was being treated like a child. "I understand the concepts. I just don't like losing money," she muttered as she handed off her own money. Ha 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 ha. Kana and Gildarts laughed as they finished their respective barrels of alcohol. The ace of fairy tale was still getting required to rest and get used to using his automale limbs for menial tasks, and what better way to do so than during a party with his family and guild. The red-haired man patted his daughter on the head as they received numerous stacks of jewels from their losing friends, listening with practically euphoric expressions as they stacked the money being set before them as if they were royalty receiving the taxes from the commoners. "That's what you get when the idiots play with the big boys," Kana shouted. "That's my girl," Gildarts whooped as he and Kana exchanged a high five. "I win. In your face," Natsu roared, fire spewing from his mouth as he laughed like a maniac. Elfman groaned from his position on the ground before chuckling, rising up to his feet and shaking hands with the son of Igniel. "Only a real man could best me like that," Elfman grinned, "and I'm happy for you getting your hearing back. If not, then you would never be able to hear the manly cries of celebration within our guild again. That would be most unmanly." "Thanks," Natsu chuckled. He stretched out his hand and Elfman graciously accepted it as he and Natsu clasped each other's forearms. With practically no effort on his part, Natsu helped pull the much larger and muscular man to his feet. "Gray-sama, you must now do battle with Natsu-san," Juvia exclaimed. "You must show that you are the best, for you are Gray-sama." "Juvia, that doesn't even make sense." Gray deadpanned. "Why'd I have to arm wrestle Natsu?" "You chicken to fight me, Ice Cube?" The Fire Dragonslayer taunted the Ice Godslayer with a cheeky grin. The student of Shiva scowled at his rival and best friend before rising up from his chair. "You wanna go, Matchstick? Boys, no fighting," Urza warned as she looked between the two rivals with a mild glare. "Oh, for fuck's sake." Lucy sighed, planting her face in her hands. "Gray, your clothes." "Damn it, not again." The black-haired mage looked down to find he was only in his underwear, his other articles of clothing somehow resting on the chair he was sitting on literally just a few seconds ago. "Gray-sama, remove your underwear. Juvia wants you so badly." The daughter of Levia looked at her chosen mate with a loving gaze, wrapping him in a tight embrace, hearts in her eyes as she began to nuzzle his cheek. Gray's eyes bugged out of his head when one of Juvia's hands lashed out and grabbed him by the crotch. "What the? Juvia, what are you doing?" He began to fight off the woman, but to no avail as she merely converted her body to water and snaked her way around his nearly naked form. Juvia has been having the itch and Juvia needs Gray-sama to scratch it. Juvia's pupils became far more pronounced as her draconian libido kicked in and she gripped Gray by his shoulders. Gray, for the first time since he began his training with her so many years ago, whimpered in fear as Juvia seemed to glow with a fear-instilling light, a wide grin on her face that served to only enhance her fearsome image. "Go Gray go! Go Gray go!" The other members of the guild who had been watching the spectacle began chanting in support of their resident stripper as he was suddenly slammed down onto the ground and straddled by the blue-haired beauty. Juvia began to grind against him and a blush formed on her face as she felt the response to her ministrations. Juvia then paused in her actions to turn to Lucy. The former heir of Heartophilia concern turned and sweat dropped as she caught the gaze of the Water Dragonslayer. The sweat drop grew bigger when Juvia gave her a malicious grin, the same one that Aquarius would give her whenever the celestial spirit would brag about her having a boyfriend and she didn't. "Why are you looking at me like that? Juvia, Gray-sama is mine. You are my love rival, but even so, you shall not have him," Juvia roared as her lower half turned into her water and her hands became large claws of the liquid. "Metsuryu Ougi. Gray, control your woman," Lucy screamed as she ducked behind Natsu for safety. "She's not my woman, damn it." The screaming and laughter that came about with Juvia literally trying to kill Lucy was made even louder as the spectators whooped and cheered. "I got 1,000 jewels on Lucy, 3,000 on Juvia. Why are you betting on my survival?" All of a sudden, the doors opened without a resounding bang, and all forms of merriment and laughter seemed to die away. Makarov raised an eyebrow when he caught sight of the figure that had the gall to enter his guild in such a manner. However, that feeling of mild anger died away once he caught sight of who that intruder was. "Roshi," Makarov raised his mug high into the air. "Nice to see you again, old friend." "Same to you, Maki." The Lava Dragonslayer chuckled as he stopped at the bar counter and caught the full mug of beer sent his way. He took long, loud gulps of the cool substance and released a sigh of content when he took it away from his lips. "Got some good drink here, Maki." "Roshi-sensei." Natsu leapt at his teacher and the Fire Dragonslayer's fist became encased in blue and white fire. Roshi sighed and he raised his left arm up. The arm, clothing included, became completely black with veins of orange-yellow lava flowing along its length. Roshi didn't even turn his head as he caught the fist of his student before swinging him down, the momentum flipping Natsu so that he would land harshly on his back. The lava Dragonslayer raised his boot before stamping it down on the rosette's face with enough force to crack the wooden floor beneath it. The guild was greeted with uncharacteristic silence once again, the younger members gawking at how easily their resident firebrand had been put down. "Natsu, what I did tell you about yelling out your opponent's names?" the son of Volcanus asked, his eyebrow twitching in annoyance.
The son of Igneel released a sigh and spoke with a dejected tone, "Not to do ift." Said reply was also muffled as the boot was covering his mouth.
"And why?" Because I'd lose the element of surprise. Roshi nodded before moving his boot off of Natsu's face and then pulling the younger Dragonslayer to his feet by his hair. The red-haired man shook his head with disappointment. "You learned so much, Natsu, and yet you're still such a dumbass." "That's the guy who taught Natsu during his 3 months off?" Lucy asked Urza. "It seems so," the Titania of Fairy Tail replied. "It doesn't seem so, girls. It is so," Roshi stated, watching their wide-eyed gazes upon being heard. The son of Volcanus pointed at his ears. "Dragonslayer. Enhanced hearing. You learn to keep that in mind when you talk in my presence." Roshi then dragged Natsu along before he placed his student back in his seat beside Lucy while also taking a seat on the other side of him. "And I'm assuming you're the famous Lucy that I've heard so much about from my idiotic student?" Famous?" Lucy stuttered. "Roshi-sensei," Natsu exclaimed, his face turning red with what seemed to be embarrassment. He sent out a small fireball, but Roshi clamped his hand over the fireball and snuffed it out in one fell swoop. "Oh, you didn't know?" Roshi grinned, displaying the sharp canines that were characteristic of Dragonslayers. "Well, it's not my place to say what it is I discussed with my pupil, but just in case the boy gets his wish, do make sure he doesn't hurt himself. He's strong and holds a great deal of potential, but he's still a dunce." "I've already been doing that because he's a dunce." Lucy deadpanned. Roshi chuckled as he heard Lucy's words while also spying Natsu's amusingly hurt expression. He got up from his seat and slapped the younger mage on the back, making her yelp in surprise and a bit of pain. "You got fire in you, brat. No wonder my pupil's so taken with you." Lucy's eyes widened at that and she looked to the Natsu's still downtrodden visage. "You're definitely one of Maki's kids, all right." Natsu continued to be hurt for a few more moments as he glared at Roshi for enhancing his title as an idiot and for teasing him. However, his dark-colored eyes then gained a light of confusion as he took note of a lack of a certain monkey costume wearing exceed. "Roshi-sensei. Where's son?" The black-eyed man's happy persona suddenly darkened and he looked at the fire Dragonslayer with a serious gaze. The atmosphere around their table suddenly felt as if it had dropped by a few degrees and Roshi looked to the doors as a cloud of white mist began to flow into the guild hall. The magic energy that is infused with the mist acted instantaneously and soon, each and every guild member began to feel drowsy. The cause of the mist entered the guild and all eyes turned to him. He wore a dark blue cloak and his arms and legs were mostly covered in bandages. He wore a dark blue bandana with a silver forehead protector. And a green mask that obscured the bottom half of his face. Strapped to his back were several staffs. The black-eyed man paused as he stood before the others. The sounds of heads knocking against wood echoed throughout the much quieter guild hall and glass mugs rolled across the floor as they slipped from the now slack grips of the other mages. "I couldn't be that much of a lightweight," Lucy thought. She was never one to drink, and even when she joined Fairy Tail, she continued to uphold that habit, but for that little toast that happened beforehand, she would bend the rules a little and so she had downed the entirety of her mug's contents in one shot. The world began to spin and darkness began to creep through from her peripheral vision. However, before she herself blacked out, she noticed everyone else was beginning to collapse onto their sides, falling to their chairs and landing onto the unforgiving floor. Levi, Jet, Dwa, Wakaba, Warren, Kana, Macau. All succumbed to the realm of unconsciousness except for a few. Natsu quickly reacted and caught the blonde and happy before they could hit the floor, Gajeel doing the same with Levi. "What's going on?" the Titania of Fairy Tail asked. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden wandering. Mistogen, Natsu's eyes widened as he finally managed to get a good look at the S-class mage. For years, no one in the guild outside of Makarov, Laxus and Gildarts had managed to see Mistogen in the flesh, let alone knew who he was. Yet, here he was, walking towards them, his staff clacking against the wooden floor, the sound echoing throughout the now quiet guild. Roshi watched with pride as his student remained conscious throughout the whole process of watching most of his fellow guildmates fall asleep. The only ones that remained awake were himself, Makarov, Natsu, Gildarts, Gray, Urza, Juvia and Gajeel. "Mistogen," Urza exclaimed. "But, he usually puts us to sleep with his sleep magic. Why doesn't it work now?" "My sleep magic only affects those who are unable to counteract the magic energy I produce to activate the spell that puts you all to sleep," Mistogen muttered, his voice sounding strangely familiar to the strongest team. "Only those with a strong enough magic signature can withstand it. It seems that a few of you all have unexpectedly become strong enough to do so. Mistogen, increase the output and knock them out." Makarov ordered as he leapt from his spot atop the bar counter and landed atop the table of conscious mages. Mistogen would have done so, but Roshi's magic energy flared and he glared at the cloaked mage. The staff wielder gulped, freezing as the son of Vulcanus utilized his killing intent. I'd rather it not be so, and it's best you kids hear about this because your master has no doubt been keeping Edalus a secret from you all. Edalus? Urza asked. Roshi, Makarov snapped. That's enough. No, it's not, Makarov, Roshi stated with an even tone. Everyone who is a mage knows about Edalus except for your mages because you think everything needs to be a secret. This is why when you offered me to join, I declined wholeheartedly. You keep things from the people you see as family because you believe you're protecting them. It is very much the opposite. Knowledge is a form of power in this world and many others, Makarov, and you denying them that is not going to keep them alive when they end up facing certain challenges. I could have just as easily have told Natsu about Edalus during his training with me, and there was nothing you could have done to prevent me from doing UE, but nothing, the red-haired man interrupted. I know you kept Edalus a secret to protect him, but the time would have come eventually when secrets needed to come out into the open. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw Roshi point at Mistogen, the staff wielder flinching at being the center of attention. Mistogen, Gray raised an eyebrow. I know he's a secretive kind of guy and we've never seen his face before, but what kind of secrets would he have? We all have skeletons in our closets. His couldn't be worse than any of ours. Well, actually, Mistogen's secrets are actually a lot more complicated than any of ours could ever be. Gildarts chuckled nervously as he rubbed the back of his head with his flesh arm. What do you mean? Natsu asked. Juvia is also confused. We want answers. Gajeel growled out. So Mistogen, we need answers, so start with answering this. Insert music. Fairy Tale Guild Darkness. Who are you? Urza was the one to speak the question. Mistogen remained silent, his eyes still somewhat hidden by the cloth that covered the majority of his face. He then turned to look at Makarov. Master? The Titan of Fairy Tale sighed audibly before he nodded to the staff wielder. An equally audible sigh escaped Mistogen's obscured lips before he nodded in return. He then reached up to the cloth that covered his head, and with one swift motion, yanked it off. Eyes were wide and jaws were agape as the young fairy tale mages looked at their S-class with the very definition of astonishment. No way. Gray muttered. How? What the hell? This doesn't even make any sense. Natsu exclaimed as his confusion was mixed in with feelings of anger and rage when he looked upon the face of Mistogen. Why? Why does he look like Jel-El? Urza's quiet voice seemed to drown out everything else. Standing before her was indeed the very likeness of the man she had once loved. The same blue hair, the same facial structure and even the same red tribal tattoo that ran across his left eye like a scar. She, in her own way, formally denounced that notion when she spoke to his comatose form on the Christina after they had finished the battle with Oracion Siete. So why was he here standing before her once more? Why was he not rotting in the prison cell he was taken to? Why? I'm not Jel-El. A period of silence filled the guild hall. Makarov shook his head as Gildarts patted the old man on the back with what seemed to be pity. Huh? Was the intelligent reply from the younger mages. I only look like Jel-El Fernandez, but I am not him. Juvia is even more confused than she was before. Juvia muttered as she held her hat-covered head. Mistogen sat down at a table across from the others, resting the staff in his hand across his lap. Then it will do you much good to listen to my explanation because I'm quite sure that I will require your assistance for the coming journey. He took a deep breath in preparation, the suspense increasing as the conscious guild members waited for him to speak. I am from a parallel world. Your world is called Earthland, while the world parallel to it is known as Edalus. It is, in layman's terms, a sort of mirror of the dimensional world known as Earthland, hence why I exist. I am the parallel of Jel-El Fernandez. From there on, Mistogen went on to explain the mechanics of Edalus. How it was a world with no Eternano. He told of how there were alternate versions of nearly every person in Earthland, thus leaving open the possibility of there being alternate versions of themselves. And finally, he told of the Exceed. What they were and how they were revered as royalty and deities in the other world due to being the only creatures in Edalus that were capable of using the magic inside themselves. So you're telling me that Happy? Gray's disbelief was paramount as he pointed at the unconscious cat, is a god? Not in the way that you all define a god. If the people of Edalus were to see you perform your feats of magic, they would most likely bow down to you as well. Gan replied. However, I believe the reason behind Roshi appearing here is because of how the 9 have been captured. All looked heavily confused at that point. Granted, they were still confused beforehand, but this bit of information was much more so. The 9 are 9 of the most powerful beings ever created by the universe and are originally creatures of Edalus before. Certain circumstances led to them fleeing here to Earthland. Sun is a part of the 9 then? Natsu asked. That is correct. Roshi spoke this time. The 9 are given a hierarchy of power based on the number of tails they possess. Son Goku is the four-tailed member of the nine and thus he is the sixth weakest member by that logic. Thus, there are 5 others far more powerful than he is at his full power. More powerful than Son? Natsu uttered in disbelief. You know of the Kyuubi attack on the Magic Council HQ? Everyone nodded. There was not a soul on the planet that wouldn't have known about that nightmarish occurrence. The Onibi Myobu, now holding the moniker of Kyuubi no Yoko, is the strongest and eldest of the 9. What? All the mage signs, Roshi exclaimed. That is correct. Mysogan nodded. And with the Kyuubi and his siblings now back in Edelus, that could spell trouble for my dimension, and actually. He looked over the group before him. I could actually gain quite a bit of help from you all. Especially you Dragonslayers. How from us especially? Juvia asked. Insert music. Code Geass R2 Matter Sky. You are men and women blessed by the most powerful creatures in the universe. To have you all on the side to help stop the plot involving the 9 would surely be a boon for me. Mistogen tightly gripped his staff and brought himself down to his knees, bowing down to the point that his head touched the ground. So please, help me save my world from the destruction that is sure to occur. I'm not going to help you because of Edelus being destroyed, Roshi said. I'm going because I want to get my friend back. I'll help as well, as will the rest of us, Urza stated with a small smirk, planting her hand on the shoulder of Mistogen. The citizen of Edelus looked at the Titania and her nakama with wide eyes. But you have nothing to gain from this, he said. You are far too compassionate to be like the Jelal I know, and besides, it's the policy of Fairy Tail to help its own. Right? Mysogan looked at Makarov and Gildarts and the 2 S-class level mages shrugged their shoulders. They're big boys and girls now. It's obviously dangerous, but I can't stop them from doing what they want to do. But I'm not going, Gildarts said as he raised his automail limbs. The way I am now, a guy still undergoing rehab, I'll just end up holding you guys back. It'd be bad for me to ignore my own guild's policy. The Titan of Fairy Tail added as he looked to Roshi and Mistogen. Can I trust you to keep my kids safe? I won't make a promise I can't keep, Maki, Roshi replied, but I'll do my best. With that, the small group followed Mistogen out into the rainy weather. Mistogen then turned around, raising his eyebrow in confusion as his black eyes focused on Natsu. What do you think you're doing? All eyes turned to the pink-haired Dragonslayer as he carried Happy on his head and Lucy in his arms. I've always worked with these two. If I'm gonna go to a strange place, no offense to Urza and Roshi-sensei, but I'd rather work with people I know I can fight well with. Salamander's got a point, Gajil said. If that's the case, Juvia wishes to bring Grey-sama with her, Juvia exclaimed before turning to run into the arms of her beloved, but her iron-using counterpart grabbed her by the collar of her shirt, halting her movement. Oh no you don't. If you're with the Ice Godslayer you're just gonna try and rape him at every opportunity you can find and compromise the entire objective. Juvia remained silent and the blue-eyed Dragonslayer pouted as she turned Amun. So? She has no shame, everyone thought. Anyway, how are we getting to this Edelus place anyway? Urza asked. The reason why I haven't been to the guild is because the king of Edelus, King Faust, has been stealing magic energy from Earthland to use to supply it for Edelus, which, as I previously explained, is completely lacking an Eternano in its atmosphere. In order to commit to this act, King Faust developed the ability to open the anima, a rip in spacetime that acts as a bridge between our two worlds. Mistogen explained. The reason I haven't been around the guild is because I have been moving across the continent, preventing the openings of the anima wherever and whenever I could in order to protect Earthland from losing its magic. So, what does that mean? The Iron Dragonslayer asked, wiping his brow as rainwater began to roll down into his eyes. I've spent my life closing the anima, but I can open it as well. Mistogen then removed all of his staves before slamming them down into the ground. He made a few hand motions before pointing at the wooden weapons and magic energy flared from each of them. Like bolts of lightning, magic energy was unleashed from the staves and rose up into the stormy skies. The clouds visibly began to twist and twirl, forming a funnel that moved upwards. Magnolia Town's skies were covered by a swirling vortex, space and time seeming to rupture as it came into existence. We're going to Edelus, and with that, the group felt their bodies being pulled into the vortex and everything went black. End flashback Urza's dressing room, bar, Lewin now. After that, I found myself in an alleyway here in this town. Since I was alone, I assumed that everyone got split up when we went through the anima and ended up in different places. The 3 Dragonslayers had been listening attentively to her recap of the events that occurred from yesterday and nodded along. That's true. Roshi confirmed. We actually ended up in some wasteland and it took us the majority of the day to find civilization. And good thing it had a bar too. Indeed. The daughter of 2 wizard saints agreed. Like most people, I thought maybe I could try and find you all by looking in the bar. Urza stepped out from behind the changing curtain of her dressing room, her bejeweled bikini outfit now completely obscured by a comfortable-looking white robe. While it did cover up her body, it did not do well to try and cover up her massive cleavage. She then moved to sit down in her chair, crossing her legs as she looked up from having tied the robe's rope around waist securely. Told you that's what people do, Gajeel said to Juvia. The water Dragonslayer merely stuck her tongue out at her iron-eating counterpart like the mature mage that she was. But Urza-san, Juvia is confused as to how you ended up in such a odd predicament in only one day. Juvia blushed as she recalled the very sensual motions her friend had done on the pole not too long ago. She never knew a human leg could bend that far over their own head. Well, Urza cleared her throat as a blush of embarrassment adorned her face. I had gotten hungry, and I ended up eating a lot of the strawberry cheesecake they were serving. I realized I had no money on me at the point of eating my fill, so in order to pay it off, I had to pole dance for the night. The three Dragonslayers looked to each other and then to the Titania of Fairy Tail as her face was now as red as her hair. Silence passed between the four until the three Dragonslayers' bodies began shaking heavily. A snort of amusement broke through from Juvia and that ended up being the catalyst for the roars of laughter that now filled the room. Gajeel fell off of his chair, while Roshi stood up only to collapse onto his knees and holding his stomach. Why you strip? BB because of cheesecake? Gajeel guffawed. That's gotta be the most fucked up form of payment I've ever heard. I've heard many things in my life, but this? Roshi pointed a finger at his fellow redhead. This is a first. Maki's kids never disappoint in making me laugh. Shut up. Scene would have appeared out of her ears at this point due to how much her face was heating up. This is embarrassing for me. Juvia, help me. Juvia is sorry. Urza ha-ha-ha-san, but Juvia. CCA ha-ha-ha can't. Juvia can't even. Ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. The blue-haired daughter of Levia tried in vain to support her friend in her time of need, but it was too much for her and she broke down as well, rolling on the floor. Urza's eyebrow twitched violently and the vein on her forehead became visible. She raised her shaking armored fist and her brown eyes blazed with feminine fury. Shut up already. Pow. Wham. Slam. Urza held her smoking fist as the three Dragonslayers were now humorously bowing down on their hands and knees. They placed their heads on the ground, each one now sporting a large red bump atop said skulls. We are deeply sorry and wholeheartedly apologize, Urza-sama, they exclaimed. You're damn right you should be sorry, the brown-eyed weapons specialist muttered. Insert music. As cat. Once all the excitement had calmed down, the three Fairy Tail members and Roshi began to converse about their current situation. We've lost Natsu, Gray, Lucy and Happy, Urza said as she did a headcount of her missing friends. Also, let's not forget Mistogen. Roshi added. He was our to get here, and he's our only way back to Earthland. Maisagen-san said that he needed our help to stop the King of Edalis from using the Nine in a way that would probably not end well for this world. Juvia recalled. So, in order to find Mistogen, it's best we head for the location of our goal. And if we're looking for a king, Gajeel spoke up, his red eyes narrowed in thought. We should probably be looking for a castle. That shouldn't be too hard. The son of Volcanus reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded up piece of brown paper. The others watched with interest as he unfolded it and laid it out across Urza's dressing room table. I managed to talk the bartender into giving me this during our first order of drinks. Edalis doesn't seem to very well laid out in the topographical sense. Juvia commented as she looked at how there were rarely any areas labeled as towns or cities. Well, there are a bunch of floating islands everywhere and you saw how much of the land was just wasteland on our way here. The dark-eyed Dragonslayer pointed out. Urza looked over the map with confusion written across her face. So, where exactly are we? She asked. We appear to be in a town called Lewin. The lava Dragonslayer pointed at said town on the map. And if we're looking for the King of Edalis like Mistogen wants us to, and like Metallicana's boy here just suggested, we should head to the royal city, here. All eyes followed Roshi's finger as he dragged it in an easterly direction before it came to a stop on a large red dot. Judging from the scale on the map, it shouldn't take us too long to get there. At least, I'd say it'll take us a couple of hours on foot. The Iron Dragonslayer said before clapping his together in anticipation. Alright, we got our destination. Let's move out. Wait, what? Gajeel asked in annoyance. What's the problem, Titania? I think we should look for Nakama first. Urza suggested before looking at the adopted children of dragons. With your ability to sniff out other Dragonslayers, shouldn't you be able to find Natsu? And if Lucy and or Happy happen to be with him, then it'll help us in the long run when we prepare to help Mistogen when we manage to find him too. We should, but while we would be able to track my wayward student, the time it would take and the distance we would have to travel in order to find him would be very much unknown. The Lava Dragonslayer replied as he scratched his head. In my honest opinion, I think it would be best to at least head out in the direction of the royal city and hope for the best. Juvia concurs. The daughter of Levia nodded Stifers correctly. Capital cities are very attractive to people. If it is anything like Crocus and Fury, then Juvia thinks there would be a high probability of us finding Natsu-san, Lucy-san and Happy-san in that capital. The Titania of Fairy Tail bit her lip and thought. The blue-haired woman did raise a good point regarding their chances of finding her friends in a well-populated area like the capital of Edalis, and the son of Vulcanus had a solid point as well regarding the time and effort it would take to track them down merely by following Natsu's scent. She closed her eyes and sighed in defeat. Fine. We'll head out for the royal city tomorrow morning. The three Dragonslayers gave the red-haired woman puzzled expressions. Why tomorrow? Urza became as red as her hair, her embarrassment once again coming to the forefront as she began loosening her robe. Like I said, in order to pay off for my bill I had promised the bartender that I'd do the pole dancing through the night. So, I still have my shift for the night. Urza's brown eyes then looked confused, for as she was heading for the door to head back out, she saw Roshi digging through his pockets. Her confusion only increased when she saw her fellow redhead pull out a jewel bill. The bill was folded neatly before being placed securely in the valley of her bosom. Smack. Eep. She cried out as Roshi pushed her out the door via a harsh smack on her rear. Knock him dead, Urza-chan. You, and the… Why would you? I just… Mother of… Urza turned to the son of Vulcanus making a series of exaggerated body motions and facial expressions. She went through complete and utter shock, then she became embarrassed for the umpteenth time that night. This was followed by feminine fury as she clenched her fists tightly and seemed as though she would rip her hair out from how tightly she gripped it before the look of defeat finally set in. The sister of the Ogono Fujin looked down at the money and pushed down deeper into her cleavage before dragging her feet across the floor to embarrass herself in public once more. Well, at least Okawa-sama, Odo-sama and Oni-sama aren't here to see this. If they were, I'd probably die. Her embarrassed face then became dejected as she recalled her conversation with her brother after they had gotten their answers from Minato and Kushina. She still hadn't found her answer. She recalled the last words her brother had told her in the wood sea. But as much as it brought a warm feeling in her chest knowing her brother believed in her ability to make the right choice in the end, it still didn't help her in figuring out what the right choice was. She sighed. What do I do? Fairy Tale Guildhouse, outskirts, Edalis. The next day, I can't believe that out of every single place on this dragon-forsaken world, I had to end up here. His disdain was made paramount as he had just walked out of the bathroom of his guest bedroom. The escape with Lucy Ashley and Natsu Dragian had been very disappointing when it was revealed that their rescuers had been members of this world's fairy tale. He had made it an unspoken life's mission to never, ever set foot inside a fairy tale. But the universe decided to fuck with him and made him do so within the fairy tale in another world, acting like a lawyer who had found the loophole in a contractual agreement. To make matters worse, while he and his surrogate Imouto had made the ceasefire agreement between Lucy Heartfilia and Natsu Dragneel, the fact that their rescuers were their Edalis selves made Naruto groan and internally complain that much more violently on the drive to the guild. Two of them. Bad enough I had to deal with one of each, but now there's two. He looked up at the ceiling and sighed. Tusan, if you have the ability to just break through space and time and smite me now like the divine dragon you are, just do it now, please. He spread his arms wide, waiting for the roar from the black dragon of the apocalypse to accompany the blast of destructive magic energy that would allow him the sweet freedom to escape from the horrid fate of dealing with his current situation. A few seconds passed, and there was no smiting. He sighed in disappointment. Seems smiting was an act only suited to gods, and not dragons. He blinked in confusion as he saw his clothes looked and smelled very clean, the artificial scent of lavender being imbued into the fabric. He walked up to folded articles that had been rested atop his bed which he had taken the liberty of cleaning up himself before showering. He raised a perplexed eyebrow when he saw the small note present atop the washed clothes. Took the liberty of washing and fixing them while you were in the shower. There's also some fresh bandages for your arm. You're welcome. Love, Mirajane. Naruto tilted his head in confusion. Love? Putting the thought to how the parallel world's version of Mirajane Strauss ended her note, Naruto dropped his towel on the wooden floor and proceeded to reach for his underwear. He picked up the pair of briefs, observing them from a few different angles for a moment. Impressive. He complimented. She even sewed up the small tears after my fight with Void Dragon. The blonde's impressed expression quickly became thoughtful as he recalled the titanic battle he had went through against his cousin by Dragon Parent. He had used Excalibur's trump card, an attack that he remembered had shattered the area of the moon that he and Kankaku had been fighting on. But how did he manage to counteract it? Excalibur's strike is able to rip through dragons with ease, and yet, even though it drew energy from my own drive mode, his roar still managed to place it into a stalemate. Was it not enough power, or did Void Dragon really draw that much cosmic energy from the surrounding space seeing as we were practically in his element? The thought as to what exactly led to his fight ending up in a draw rather than a victory had the naked blonde humming in thought. The son of Acnologia was snapped out of those thoughts however, when someone knocked on his door. I'm coming in. The friendly and cheerful voice of one Mirajane Strauss met his ears as she opened the door slightly. The white-haired girl then paused as her blue eyes took in the Apocalypse Dragonslayer's form. The silence was practically deafening as the two blue-eyed occupants of the guest bedroom were no longer staring eye to eye. Mirajane's eyes drifted downwards rather quickly and her face immediately became a shade of red that would have almost made Kurama's eyes a paler shade. Her lips wriggled and her vision swam for a moment due to the blood rushing to her head. "You're staring, Strauss. PPP penis," the 19-year-old muttered. "Yes, that is my genitalia. What of it? I didn't mean to barge in, but I came to tell you that your penis is ready. I mean your breakfast is penis. I'm so. Penis," she exclaimed. Her eyes widened and her face burned even hotter, steam practically coming out of her ears at this point. "Penis, sorry." "Excuse me?" The Ogono Fujin was terribly confused at this point. "I mean, sorry penis. I penis oh by the dragons, I mean. Kya." The screaming young woman bolted from the room, slamming the door extremely hard behind her. Naruto winced as his sensitive ears registered the loud bang before sighing. "I will never understand women," he thought as he began to put on his underwear. As he put on the dark orange pair of pants and began to put on his shirt, his mind suddenly drifted to a certain dark-haired beauty. "Annoying bitch. I wonder if that troublesome woman is considering my offer," he scoffed. "Not that I care, should probably just take my chances and kill her the next time I see her once I get Kurama back." Is kill supposed to be a metaphor for something, or do you actually mean that? Naruto released a groan of annoyance as the voice of the Heartfilia heir met his ears. "What do you want, Heartfilia?" "Well, I saw Mira-chan, the Mira-chan of this world I mean, screaming around your room. I think I heard her say something about an elephant trunk and a snake or something, but I'm not too sure what that even means. I hardly believe that would warrant a visit to my quarters, Heartfilia." "Well oh oi," she shouted as Naruto began to walk past her, adjusting the armband on his left bicep while adjusting the new bandages wrapped around his still injured arm. He gave himself a once-over as he was in mid-stride before leaving the room, closing the door behind him. Lucy then shifted, stepping aside before following after him. "Oi, I'm talking to you, and as you can clearly see, I'm ignoring you, now go away. But we need to discuss our next plan of action to find Natsu-sensei since we got thrown off track by Urza." She didn't notice Naruto's eye twitch at the mention of Nightwalker. "Not to mention we have to find the Onibi Myobu for you and Son Goku. Can you not walk so fast?" For each one of his long strides, the smaller mage had to take two as she fought to keep up with him, and despite her fit and strong frame, walking at a brisk pace was something she did not want to do so early in the morning. The blonde Dragonslayer continued to ignore the celestial spirit mage as he walked into the main hall. Without missing a beat, he headed for the bar table and sat at the seat where his hot plate of breakfast was waiting for him. Eggs, buttered toast, hash browns, a small stack of pancakes and the glorious crispy meat that was bacon. A tall glass of ice water accompanied the most important meal of the day, and damn did it look good. He swiveled his chair as he ate, analyzing the guild around him as he ate. Insert music. Fairy tale Kazuna. It's really weird, isn't it? Everyone looks exactly everyone else back on Earthland, but they're so different. Lucy laughed. Juvia is usually the one obsessing over Gray, but here it's the other way around. Not to mention Juvia's become somewhat of a bad girl and Gray is now wearing too many layers instead of stripping. Levi, Jet and Dwa are really vulgar and aggressive, and not to mention they're actually contenders for the strongest mages in the guild. Just earlier they were bullying this world's elfman because he screwed up a job. Given he's such a man's man back home, to see him as such a wimp. It isn't even compared to this Natsu. He seems to be like a little kid whenever he gets out of the car, just like Ashley told me he would. Naruto finished his pancakes and began moving on to the bacon, the last thing on his plate. Gajil's not even here, same for the master and Gildarts. Maybe they aren't even a part of Fairy Tail here in Edalis. Or maybe they're dead. Naruto commented as he chomped down on his last piece of crispy meat. Your counterpart explained to us about Urza Nightwalker last night on the way here after you told them about Earthland. Mage guilds are illegal in this world due to the near non-existent level of Eternano present in the atmosphere, and so King Faust has to try and conserve the resource that is magic energy. She is upholding the law of her kingdom and has taken lives in order to do so. Strong, capable and willing to do what is necessary. Titania could learn from her when it comes to that last one. I like our Urza the way she is, and your opinion matters to me? Lucy fumed and huffed, turning away from the older blonde and ended up facing the still flustered Mira-Jane Strauss of Edalis. Well, Urza is gonna stay the way she is, just like how Mira-chan's kind of the same here and back home. I mean, she was even kind enough to wash our dirty clothes while we were showering. It's almost disgusting how trusting you are of people, he muttered as the former concern heiress patted down her black, Heart Cruise brand tank top and white shorts. Given how giddy she was, any other soul who didn't know her would never think she was a capable user of the Kusarigama and the magic-length altering staff she had on her person. Hey Fujin, by the dragons, does she ever stop talking? He thought as he grunted in acknowledgement. I can tell that you're a pretty intelligent person, and you know a lot of general knowledge. But then again, Everyone else seems the same since I hang out with rowdy idiots all day. Lucy muttered as she looked at the fairy tale members of Daedalus. But, I've been at the guild for 6 months. I made friends with basically everyone, but I never heard of Lysana Strauss before. Never even seen her in the guild either. The son of 2 wizard saints looked at Lucy before following her unblinking stare, her brown eyes having been focused on Natsu Dragneel as he had just pulled off winning an arm wrestling contest with Jet and Dwa at the same time. The roars of surprise and amazement were met with equal volume from Natsu's roar of victory. The rosette then sat back down as he was congratulated by a young petite girl with the same skin color as Mirajane, short, white hair and blue eyes. She wore a tank top with crossed straps with a longer skirt. A light pink sash with the fairy tale mark was tied around her waist and she wore white sandals. Lysana Strauss? So you do know of her? Naruto turned and raised an eyebrow at how harsh her tone was. Her gaze towards the youngest of the Strauss siblings holding a small bit of anger when the white-haired girl wrapped her arms around the son of Igneel. A small blush formed on the fire Dragonslayer's face as he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment from the display of affection he was given. Ah, you're jealous. The celestial spirit mage's head turned towards him so quickly that she could have gotten whiplash. Her eyes were wide and her face was now sporting a shade of red similar to what the scarf-wearing Dragonslayer had. WHWH what? I'm not jealous, and Natsu and I are just friends. Why does everyone keep thinking anything differently? That is such an idiotic question. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. He deadpanned. But as to what I know about Lysana Strauss, I made it my business to know any and everything that happens or has happened within Fury in order to keep up to date with the world. I know everything that I need to know about the legal guilds of the kingdom, as well as their members. Lysana Strauss being dead does not exempt her from that. Lucy slowly, almost robotically, turned to face the Apocalypse Dragonslayer, her eyes widening at a similar place. He dead?
Lysana Strauss was the youngest of the 3, and was also quite a talented user of the branch of takeover magic known as Animal Soul.
This allowed her to take on the physical capabilities or forms of any animal that she has in her arsenal, similar to how her siblings utilize the souls of beasts and demons. The 3 of them bearing such similar magics earned them the moniker of the Takeover Trio.
Naruto continued to speak as if he hadn't even heard the Kusarigama wielder's words. Fire Dragon's mission report history from 2 years ago showed he went on missions with the youngest Strauss sibling quite frequently.
The same could be said for her mission report history as well before her passing. The story of Lysana Strauss of Earthland, while I could just easily tell it to you, I do have my respect for the dead and those who know them. That being said, if you wish to know her tale, then it's best you ask Fire Dragon or one of the other members of your annoying clubhouse yourself, as it is not my story to tell. Conversation between the 2 blondes came to an abrupt halt on that note. Naruto began to drink his glass of ice water as Lucy looked back at Natsu's smiling visage. He had shown her toothy grins to her before, his greatest portrayal of happiness.
But something about the way he smiled as he looked at Lysana, something in his dark-colored eyes, it was different to the ones he showed her. She raised her hands to her chest and a sad smile formed on her face. The feeling of constriction in her chest, it was exactly how it was described in some of the books she loved to read. The tugging feeling of having your heart being gripped, just a few steps away from being pulled out of her own body. Lucy looked at the rosette with a sad smile, the grip she had on her chest tightening as it bunched up that specific portion of her top.
Guess I really am jealous, huh? She rhetorically asked herself. Oni-san. The 2 blondes were knocked out of their thoughts, turning in the direction of the voice. Lucy's eyes bugged out of her head in shock, that shock only intensifying when Naruto suddenly did a spit take in her direction. By the dragons, that's gross, you spat all over my face. Lucy shrieked in disgust. The Ogono Fujin ignored her for the 3rd time today as he completely looked past the skipping visage of his surrogate little sister and instead focused on the person that followed after her. Her eyes were the same shade of brown, her hair the same deep blue, and her face was pretty much the same, if only a little rounder, that reminded the wielder of the blades of Merlin of his mother's own. But the similarities ended there, since Daedalus Wendy Marvel was a grown-ass woman with curves in all the right places and equipped with a pair of tonfas. The blue-haired daughter of Grandine skipped out from within the bowels of the Daedalus Mage Guild before taking the seat on her brother figure's right-hand side. Oni-san, I'm all better now thanks to Wendy. That's great, Imo Udo. His words were soft as he kept his eyes glued to the young woman before him. I just finished healing her, so I wouldn't recommend you reprimand her for whatever she did with violence. Edo Wendy stated. We don't that much healing lacrimas left, but she has a spectacular healing ability. She took the healing magic stored within them and it was like witnessing an act of divinity. The way her burns just vanished. Though, that stab wound to the shoulder may leave a bit of a scar. Damn that woman. Naruto growled, his vertical pupils and bared fangs making his angered face quite frightening as he saw Wendy absent-mindedly hold onto her right shoulder where Nightwalker had impaled her. Edo Wendy raised her hands in a placating manner, slowly backing away from the older man as his angry expression focused on her. The anger steadily vanished before he gave her a stiff nod of the head. "You have my thanks." Naruto flicked the Sky Dragonslayer on the forehead and then gestured to her Edalus counterpart. Wendy groaned in annoyance, rubbing the small reddened area of her forehead, but caught the gist of what her brother figure was wordlessly telling her. She faced the more developed version of herself and bowed her head. "Thank you, Wendy." "No problem. Wendy, it was really awkward being polite to an alternate version of yourself." "I still don't understand. How the hell does this qualify as the parallel of Wendy? Unless..." Naruto turned to his student and smacked her upside the head. "Ow," she yelped, holding her injured noggin. "Oni-san, that hurt." "And it should." The blonde growled. "I wouldn't recommend hitty." "Stay out of this, Heartfilia." Naruto didn't even turn to face her as he pushed over her chair, sending her crashing to the ground. "What the hell are you thinking? Worrying about having curves at your age? You're 12, Imoudo. You haven't even hit puberty yet?" Lucy and Edo Wendy, who was helping the fallen celestial spirit mage back to her feet, looked at each other in confusion before turning to the pair of Dragonslayers. "I'm lost," Lucy and Edo Wendy said. "Due to Edalus being a parallel of Earthland, it takes certain aspects of a person and flips them around to make an opposite. Imoudo, what on the Earthland?" Naruto directed his disapproving glare at Wendy once more. "Would make you want to feel inadequate in terms of your physical attributes, particularly your curvature or rather a lack thereof. You've caused your Edalus counterpart to be made older and more developed." "But Oni-san, it's not fair," Wendy whined. "Every time I went on missions for Cade Shelter, all these women kept showing up with their big breasts and tiny waists and I just quit it." She now had tears poking out from the edges of her eyes due to receiving another sharp strike to her head. "You are 12. He placed emphasis on each and every one of those 3 words. "Listen to me, Sky Dragon. You are far too young to be worrying over how you are going to be affected by your own hormones and your looks at this age. I've taught you better than this. I've taught to be a Dragonslayer, and what is the most prominent aspect of a Dragonslayer's character? Their pride," she replied with a downcast look. The Apocalypse Dragonslayer released a tired sigh as he looked at his downtrodden student. "Insert music. 2 steps from Hell Compass. Look at me, Imoudo." He said this, but didn't even give her a chance to comply before holding Wendy's face and tilted it, forcing her brown eyes to meet his blue ones. "You're correct. A Dragonslayer holds pride in everything that makes them who they are. Their magic, their strength. Your physical appearance is inclusive of this as well, so don't ever compare yourself to others again. You're a Dragonslayer, and my little Sky Dragon. You're better than this." Wendy's eyes were wide and unblinking as she processed her brother's words. She grinned toothily before hugging the physically 20-year-old man tightly. "Thank you, Oni-san." Naruto stroked her head with a small smirk. "Atta girl. Now go get Fire Dragon, we need to head for the royal city soon." The blue-haired preteen nodded before hopping off of her seat and running off in the direction of the scarf-wearing fairy tale mage. "You know all this time, I thought you were just a cold, heartless killer." "I am," he confirmed, causing the female blonde to sweat drop. "Well, yeah, but I never thought I would see this side in a person like you," Lucy said. "And what side is that?" "A softer side, I guess. Caring and actually showing you're a human and not some incarnation of rage and destruction." She shrugged. When Wendy spoke of her, Oni-san, she held you in such high regard. She said you taught her everything she knows and helped her become the person she is today. You could tell she really looked up to you, idolized you even. When we saw that you, the Ogo no Fujin, were brother. I couldn't even see that, but what you did right there, you really do care for her. I was raised to do any and everything to serve my own interests. Whether they be seen as good or evil in the eyes of others, it does not matter to me, for those are just opinions. The interests that serve me are important to helping me accomplish the goals that I have laid out for myself, and to look after those whom I call my nakama is one of those interests." Naruto's sapphire orbs gained a soft look as he watched Wendy pry Natsu away from the Edalus fairy tale members. The conviction and determination in his voice and expression made Lucy stare. She was silent, and she never even realized she was holding her breath as she followed his gaze. "Then why?" Blue eyes met brown. "Excuse me, you belittled us for our bonds, saying they were useless and wouldn't help us get stronger. Yet, here you are, being the very definition of hypocritical." "I am aware of my own hypocrisy, but in this context, I hardly doubt I am being hypocritical," Naruto replied. "People use bonds to try and find a way to fuel their drive in battle. They remember words, faces or actions done by those precious people to somehow give them that extra push. It has happened to me, so I cannot belittle its effectiveness, but the reason I look down upon it for you members of Fairy Tail is because you take it too far." "What do you mean? Every legal guild regards its members as family." "Fairy Tail, you declare that the bonds of your nakama are your driving force, and it is an admirable quality worthy of respect, but to make it a source of power is suicidal. Your guild's ideology is borderline religious in its belief in the power that comes from friendship, and Bonds Betwili revealed it to you in our first encounter that bonds will not make you stronger in combat and bonds surely do not win you the fight. Surely you are aware of that. Painfully so, she muttered as she recalled the brutal defeats that Natsu, Gray and Urza suffered. But I guess a lot of good came out from you stamping down on fairy tales ideals. Everyone in the guild has suddenly begun training really hard, especially the four of us who made up the strongest team after the guild war. We wanted to be worthy of that title and we've training day in and day out, so I guess we sort of owe you a thank you for waking us up. Though, I am curious as to whether or not you raised Wendy with your same ideologies towards bonds. Wendy is one of those few people that I truly hold precious. I practically raised her during those few months after I found her in the Wood Sea. Dot and I will do whatever I need to do to protect her. She is a Dragonslayer, strong and proud. I have informed her of the realities of the world, prevented her from being too naive, but I was not blind to the fact that she was still a child. She still has many things to learn, but those life lessons are things she needs to discover for herself, the same as I did. His blue eyes were focused intently on the area of her shoulder where she had been stabbed. But she is still my Imo Udo. I will fight and kill anything and anyone that would do her harm, and that is why when I see Nightwalker, not even the dragons themselves will be able to save her from my wrath. The glass in Naruto's grip shattered, shards of glass and ice mixing in a puddle of water on the floor. Ashley, Dragian. Yo, the two Edalus fairy tale members shouted back. We're heading out, Ashley and Dragian nodded before heading to the magic four-wheeler. Ah. Natsu whined, but this is fun, and he just got here. Now, boy. The blonde snarled at the son of Igneal. Natsu pouted, reluctantly obeying, but the pout was replaced by a small smile as Lasana wished him good luck. Luce's eyes narrowed in annoyance at the way the two were looking into each other's eyes before she roughly grabbed the fire user by his scarf, pulling him out the door of the guild and shoving him into the magic four-wheeler. What was that for? Natsu angrily shouted at the blonde as she sat down beside him. Why'd you have to go and grab me like that? Lucy blushed lightly, her eyes flickering in Naruto's direction as she recalled the earlier portions of their conversation regarding Lasana. Because you're a flame brain. Natsu's sweat dropped before he turned to Naruto and Wendy for guidance. What did I do? His sweat drop merely grew when they stared at him before blatantly choosing to turn the other cheek and look out the window. Oi, don't ignore me. Don't yell at Oni-san. Wendy growled. And what are you gonna do about it, brat? The son of Igneal snarled. Hold your tongue lest I rip it out of you, Fire Dragon. Naruto bared his fangs as well. The three Dragonslayers flooded the vehicle with bloodlust and killing intent. But all of that ended just as quickly as it came when Dragian activated the magic four-wheeler. The engine roared to life and the wheels erupted into flame as it sped across the wasteland outskirts in the direction of the royal city. Lucy's sweat dropped as she looked at the three deadly mages who were now reduced to nauseated blobs of flesh. The three Dragonslayers turned and glared at her when they caught the glint of amusement in her eyes. Not a word. They grunted in unison. Streets, Royal City, Edalus. Haku sighed as she trudged behind the Wind Dragonslayer. She looked up from the cobblestone roads they had been walking on before giving the daughter of Cyclonus an exasperated look. Fu-chan, we've been around for hours. For the last time, this is not Crocus and we are lost. We're not lost. Fu replied earnestly as she spun around to face the Ice Dragonslayer. We're just temporarily misplaced. Plus, I know this isn't Crocus, now. Haku released a tired sigh once more. I can see now why Naruto-chan thought this one was such a handful. Besides, we need to keep looking around. The mint-haired girl frowned as she scoped the populated streets, shifting every so often so the members of the bustling crowd didn't bump into her. We need to find Wendy. I've gleaned that Wendy-chan is actually a very capable combatant when I met her. The dark-haired woman stated, even if we don't find her anytime soon, I'm quite sure she's more than able to take care of herself. It's not her taking care of herself I'm worried about. Fu then gained a humorous chill down her spine as the image of an angry Naruto with glowing white and the aura of the apocalypse surrounding him reared its head in her mind's eye. I'm more worried about what Naruto would do to me if he ever learned that I lost track of his Imo Udo. I could actually die, you know. The older Dragonslayer giggled as Fu began to bite her nails in fear. I'm sure you'll be fine. Oto Udo wouldn't dare hurt someone as useful as you, much. The orange-eyed Dragonslayer gave the daughter of Glacia a deadpan stare. Your words make me feel so much better, note the sarcasm. Anytime, Fu-chan, Haku said with a wide grin before looking around the royal city. Now then. Let's figure out where we should go instead of wandering around blindly. She closed her eyes and focused her senses. The multitude of sounds met her ears and she tilted her head upwards to sniff the air for a few moments. Her nostrils flared long enough to get a scent, but also short enough that no one would give her any weird looks at seeing a young woman suddenly breathing audibly through her nose. Fu watched her travel companion before backpedaling when she saw Haku's eyes suddenly snap open. Haku's obsidian orbs met Fu's bright orange ones and the mint-haired wielder of the winds tilted her head in confusion. What's wrong? What did you find? Fu-chan. Focus your senses for a moment. Tell me what you feel. Fu did as she was told, though with a bit of uncertainty as to what it was that got Haku so paranoid all of a sudden. She closed her eyes and reached out with her two most powerful senses of hearing and smell, and out of reflex, drew upon the sense that mages possessed. The sixth sense to feel a magic energy signature. Okay, I can feel. I feel a magic energy signature. It feels kind of familiar though, almost like. Fu's eyes snapped open before she took off like a bullet. Haku moved just as swiftly and the two female Dragonslayers weaved through the crowds. People yelped in surprise. A few animals released their cries as the two sped past them, but they ignored them all as they suddenly broke through to find themselves in the center of the city. The large gray lacrima that lay within the center of the royal city hummed with life, vibrant crimson energy shining within its body. The lacrima seemed to pulsate as well, magic energy flowing from it and through the conducting tubes that delved deep into the ground to supply magic energy to the population. Haku. What the hell is going on? Fu's voice cracked as she stared at the gargantuan spheroid. Why? Why does the magic energy inside that giant lacrima feel like Chome? While I don't know Chome-chan's signature, I do recognize Kurama-chan's. Haku stated, something is terribly wrong.